Hello, hello. Can you guys hear me? If you can, give me a thumbs up. All right, thank you guys. I've already packed all my I've already packed a lot of my stuff up, so no headphones, no microphone tonight. Hello, Misha, Melissa, Tim, Brandy, Raptor second, Shenandoah, await him, Just Vicky. Oh man. Rebecca, Ren, Carly, Moko, Linda, Mega's looking up. Oh man, okay, it's going too fast now. Angela, Abigail, Sherry, Chris. How's everybody doing tonight? All right. Well, hey, we're going to talk tonight about the article that I wrote, Chaos Theory. But before we go too far into that, I want to just get some housekeeping done. And we have the conference in Colorado coming up in October. I'm not going to be there. I don't get anything out of promoting it. I'm just promoting it for a friend of mine, Steve, and it's going to be September 16th and 17th, and I'll post the picture the in the link here for this video. Um, Pete, did you know you have at least two top doppelgangers out there? There was a guy that I saw the other, I was not, I don't know, this months ago, but he looked exactly like Tyler from Generation 2434. I was trying to get a picture of the guy to send. I think I did get a picture of the guy, but yeah. So conference in Colorado, September 16th and 17th in Fort Collins. I'll post the bio stuff. I already posted on my community page, but I'll post again on here if you guys need it. Um, October 5th through the 8th is the Prophecy Watchers Conference. I'll be speaking at that, and then we'll have the conference in New Zealand or Australia, New Zealand, February. That's like the first week of February. So I'll be there with Tom Hughes and some other guys, Billy Crone and Brandon Holthouse, and Mondo. Mondo is going to be is added to that list. So as we're going, as long as they don't add some kind of vaccine mandate for that, we'll be there. So so yeah, so that's the conferences that are coming up. I also have I've been recording videos going through Revelation. As soon as I can get them all upload, I've only got 10 done right now, which basically gets me from chapters 1, 2, and 3. And they're shorter videos. They're only like some of them are like 10 to 12 minutes long, some are 20 minutes. I think one is 30 minutes, but I mean, they're all fairly short in comparison to what I normally do. But I'll be uploading those on YouTube, and it'll be a separate playlist, and then I'll also post them on the website. So I'll just have to start off with the first three chapters. That's all I've been able to get done in the last few days. But I will eventually work my way through Revelation that way, and basically it'll be one video per chapter. Um, so that's coming. And then there won't be a Monday Night Live next week. I'm not planning on doing one next Monday because I'll be back in Texas. I don't know what my routine schedule is going to be like when I get back, and I for sure won't have a Thursday night Discord this week because I'll be in the process of going back. So this is it for me this week. I do have one interview with the trilogy with the Two Pros, Jeff Christian with Two Pros. Um, we'll be recording that on Wednesday, but I don't know when he'll post it. He may post that Thursday or Friday or something. I'm not sure, but I'll do one with Jeff, and then that'll be it. So I'll um, I'll be in transition back to Texas. So I think that's it. Trying to make sure I got all the housekeeping stuff. Tyler will be on tomorrow night, so you guys can catch him tomorrow night. And if you didn't catch Chooch's video last night, um, an awesome, program last night. I was there. I just kind of was lurking the whole time, and then at the very end, I typed in like "Amen" at the very end, and then I lurked on Kurt Reed's video for a little bit, and then I lurked on Zach's for a little bit, and I'm always there. You don't know when I'm going to pop up. So, anyways, I will I will keep you guys posted, but for sure no Discord this week, and maybe no Monday Night Live next Monday. So kind of play it by ear. All right, so going to talk tonight about chaos theory, and I wanted to make sure. Hopefully, you guys have all read it because you'll understand what I'm talking about here. But I'm going to kind of go through some of the highlights in it. Um, the first thing was about how a conspiracy theory is born in the 21st century. Now, certainly, there are a lot of conspiracy theories that were all over the 20th century. Everything from JFK's assassination to MK Ultra to Operation Paperclip. I mean, there's all the way back really to the beginning of the 20th century. There's all kinds of conspiracies, even back through Prohibition. Um, but particularly here in the 21st century, um, I wanted to kind of go through the stages, and I'm going to read out the stages for you guys. Number one is a sudden explosion of violence and or a tragedy that shocks the public. It kind of shocks the public conscience, right? Something happens and everybody's just kind of blown away by what just happened. Maybe it's the death of somebody that's very famous. Maybe if you think about like Anne Hedge and her death, and when you watch the video of it, it's just so bizarre how that all played out. But um, Princess Diana. There's just there's a lot of different famous people that have died in the recent Andrew Breitbart. A lot of famous people that have died in mysterious ways that certainly makes you wonder what happened. There's been tragic events like 9/11, um, the Maui fire here just recently, all the Canadian wildfires that are going on. I mean, there's just a number of things that we could look at over the last 20 years and just wonder, like, uh, how did this thing happen? So you'll have a government response. This is number two, a government response that is either uncannily premeditated or it's an abysmal failure. An example of the uncannily premeditated would be like the Sandy Hook shooting, where just so happens up the road there is a training exercise with a SWAT, all the state police, and all these guys are literally just doing the exact same scenario, kind of in a holding pattern, and they're able to respond very quickly. The perpetrator gets shot. Then it's all kind of wrapped up at that point. The other side of it is it's an abysmal failure. And I would point to just like this recent Maui fire as being an abysmal failure on the part of the state government, and now the federal government. Number three is the eruption of news coverage with what seems like a prepackaged narrative. So almost instantaneously, the news will start reporting about some event, and then there will be I don't know if it's an idea that's floated or it's an idea that is perpetrated on one of the major news channels, And then that becomes the new kind of, the narrative that's everybody's going with. And in this instance, the governor was blaming, the hurricane and climate change for what happened there. And as I posted in the article, I mean, at no point in time, I mean, the closest that hurricane got to Hawaii, the whole island chain was like 600 and, 650 miles away. That was the closest it got to it. And the winds, I was looking at the wind speeds according to the weather tracker there, and the winds weren't really above normal. Now, you could see video footage and the winds are blowing really heavily, so I don't know what the data means, why the data is showing that it's not gusting. But certainly, even if the winds were blowing up to, say, 50 miles an hour, 60 miles per hour, the year prior, they had the same wind alert going on. So these high winds or these short periods of high winds isn't necessarily unprecedented for the Hawaiian Islands. Um, and I link the news article from the previous year there, showing that they had them like 2 years ago. So you have this eruption of news coverage, and then there develops a narrative fairly quickly. And in this case, with Maui, it's going to be climate change. And then you fast forward 1 week, and sometimes it's not a week, maybe it's a week and a half, maybe it's only 2 or 3 days. But the news cycle is speeding up pretty rapidly. So about a week is about the lifespan of any given story. And then there's a sudden suppression of all the information about the event from the authorities. They may come out initially, give a few press conferences, and then say that more information is coming out as an investigation ensues, and that's really the last we hear about it. And at that point, I think number five, the suppression of the news is really what this article is about. And it's the numerous questions that are going to arise naturally from these unanswered questions. So, as information is supposed to be coming out from the authorities to the public to let them know what happened, good, bad, or indifferent, there is no information that comes out, and it leaves the public to speculate as to what happened, right? Well, then you have number seven, the community, citizens, alternative media. Everybody starts coming up with what they think happened. And most of the time you might find some really good investigative journalists that will actually usually from the alternative media that will start digging into the truth of things and will start finding answers. But as those answers are put forth by these investigative journalists from the alternative news media, they're immediately labeled as conspiracy theorists or quacks or kooks for daring to challenge the established narrative. And then lastly, uh, number 8, again, once information does come out that goes against the established narrative, anybody that questions that then is therefore targeted as a conspiracy theorist. Their social medias shadow banned or censored. There's a lot of things that happen at that point to where the news make sure that the news doesn't get out about a particular whatever the event is, right? So that's basically how a conspiracy theory is born. Um, I came up with this quote. I was listening to some guys, and they didn't say this exact thing, but it kind of made me think of it. And it says, "Conspiracy theories are like mold; they can only thrive in an environment where government keeps the truth locked in the dark, and where the media refuse to apply any disinfecting sunshine on the matter. They don't want to put any sunlight on whatever the issue is." And if we think back to um, Project Bluebird um, in the 1950s and going forward, all of the incidents where people were seeing UFOs in the skies, you know, I think it was J. Allen Hynek or Hynek, yeah, and some representatives from the military would go and take these people's, eyewitness statements, and then they would completely debunk them, even though they really saw most of the time they really saw something. And they came out and admitted that they've been doing this for a long time, that they've been, trying to um, stifle information coming out about UFOs. And for the last, from the 1950s until just recently, the government has adamantly denied any knowledge of UFOs. All the while that we know that they've actually had this technology behind the scenes. So they were intentionally lying about the technology that they've kept under wraps for their own personal use. Now, again, I'm not going to say that there are such thing as aliens. I think they're demonic beings. I don't. I think they're nefarious, whatever they are, and they seem to have ill intentions for why they do what they do. And they are definitely part of the grand deception plan here. But the point that I was making with this is the absolute cover up by the government that now is all coming out to light. I think what I meant to get to in this article in regards to chaos theory is the three things, right? So you have the suppression of truth or the silencing of truth. You have the perversion of the normal institutions, and then you have the exploitation of confusion. And I want to go to the exploitation of confusion first, though. Um, if anybody knows who, what's his name? Here it is. Carl von Clausewitz. He is a military analyst. Anybody in the military would normally have heard of this guy. He wrote a very famous book in the 1800s called On War, and he's probably one of the most quoted military strategists in the history of military. Besides Sun Tzu, this guy is probably both of those guys run neck and neck. But he writes here about the fog of war. He said, "War is the realm of uncertainty. Three-quarters of the factor in which action in war is based are wrapped in a fog of greater or lesser uncertainty. A sensitive and discriminating judgment is called for, a skilled intelligence to scent out the truth." And what happens in conflicts is that you come up, one side comes up with a really great plan, and they say, "This is going to be our plan. This is how we're going to fight this war." And the minute that plan gets put in action, things start to change and things start to fall apart because the enemy also has a plan and they also get a vote in this battle. So the enemy doesn't always do what you think they're going to do, and they throw kinks into your plan all the time. And next thing you know, it's the war is chaotic. War is chaos, right? And so in the chaos of war, they call it the fog of war because this is where things like your training, your supply lines, your logistics, your the quality of men that you have fighting, the reason they're fighting, what are they fighting for, motivations, all that stuff come into play here. Because when things get chaotic, things become very um, things begin to fall apart, right? And in a total war or a full on war like say World War II, that plans plans were definitely written in pencil, and just hand scratched on napkins because they change so quickly, and everything gets confusing out on the battlefield, especially when the enemy begins to add in new things that you weren't anticipating. And so this has always been a problem for the military. It's always been something that we've always tried to conquer and defeat. We've tried to master this idea of not allowing the fog of war to take over and become the deciding factor in a battle. And what we've seen here in the last, at least since the Cold War, is this idea of weaponizing the confusion. They weaponize the confusion because under the confusion, they're able to move this agenda, whatever their agenda they're trying to achieve. They're trying to move that thing forward while everybody's up here stumbling around trying to figure out what's going on, right? And so I think that is very much what we're seeing here in the last, really 20 years, maybe more, but definitely since, probably the last few years of the Clinton administration, the late 90s, we start to see this coming about. And I believe this is when the intelligence agencies really became emboldened to begin to make their power plays in a lot of different things. So the perversion of institutions, the United States, at least in the last, I'd say since the 1950s or 40s, are really the leader in free market capitalism. We've been we basically were the victors in World War II. We were the only country that really wasn't impacted, with the exception of the loss of life, the soldiers that went over there and fought, and then the damage that was done in Pearl Harbor. But other than that, I mean, most of the countries in Europe were just in ruin. They're in rubble all the way from London to Moscow. I mean, just devastation everywhere. And then in the Far East as well, with Japan basically destroyed, a lot of the Philippines destroyed, a lot of places within China who had been they'd had their own civil war prior to that, that was disrupted by World War II. And then, I mean, China was in disarray and just in a lot of destruction there. Um, Large places, large swaths of areas in North Africa and even parts of the Middle East had seen conflict there between the Germans and the Allied forces. So the United States walked away relatively unscathed, and we walked away basically with all of Europe's gold. And we came out in at least in 1944 with the Bretton Woods Agreement that made the U.S. dollar the world's reserve currency. So that really put us on top. Uh, we became a superpower for the first time in our nation's history, and so that was the the world order going forward. So at the end of World War II, there was a new world order. It prior to World War II, the old world order was, you had Britain as an empire. The sun never set on the British Empire. France had colonies all over the world. Germany was a dominant force. A lot of European countries had colonies and places that they had um, been building up for centuries as outposts for their own kingdoms, and those were all falling apart now. And with the United States coming online as the new world superpower, this was a new world order, right? A new change in how the world was going to function. And I think what we've seen is what's driven that is the the power of our economy. And I don't remember who said it, but somebody said that the business of America is business. And it is this idea that we are going to dominate, for the next 2 to 300 years at least. That was this kind of the mindset everybody had. America was here to stay. We were never going to go anywhere. And then the 1960s happened, and the 70s, and the 80s, and things didn't seem as rosy as they had once appeared, right? But one thing that came out of all that time was the monopolization of corporations. And as the world was moving through these industrial revolutions, they moved through the first industrial revolution in the 1800s. And then toward the end of the 1800s, you had the second industrial revolution. Now, in the mid 1900s, you had the third industrial revolution, and things are becoming um, moved to automation and to electronic devices, and we start to see this merging of different companies. And there used to be these laws, to prevent monopolies from forming. But we've seen here in the last, probably 20 years or so, maybe more, where companies have just become so big and so powerful that they eclipse many different countries. And right now, you have three of these major investment firms, BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. The only countries together of those three together, the only countries in the world that have larger GDPs than they do is China and the United States. I mean, that's incredible to think about. These are private organizations, private companies. They control the majority interest in most of the other corporations that are out there. in Coca-Cola, in Disney, and I mean, you think of the company, one of these three companies are going to have their controlling interest over those, and they're going to dictate to these companies how they're going to function. And that's where we see the introduction of things like ESG, environmental, social, government initiatives, DSG, um, or SDGs, the Sustainable Development Governance, the DEIs, which is the diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives. Um, I mean, these three companies, they own all the planes, all the airlines, they own all the media, they own all of the military industrial complex. They own all of the medical and pharmaceutical companies, or at least the biggest ones, right? And they have these controlling interests in all these companies. So they're able to dictate to them what they want to push in terms of social change. And so this is where I'm talking about the perversion of these institutions that we've had that made our nation great. Now you have these companies that are so big that they're telling governments and the rest of the economy what to do. Um, that's on top of the other perversions of institutions that have made not just our country but every country great. The institution of marriage and things like gender ideology and just things like that, things that are staples in a functioning civilization. Now these guys, the culture is changing. The cultures have changed those ideas of marriage and gender, for instance, and the leaders of these three companies have completely bought into this kind of Marxism, and now are dictating to the companies that they have controlling interest of how they're going to operate, even if it costs them billions of dollars. We know companies like Target, Disney, and Bud Light, for instance, from Anheuser-Busch, have lost billions and billions and billions of dollars promoting this agenda that nobody wants, and they are losing so much money, but they keep doubling down on it, and it makes you wonder, like, why? Why are they so bent on on losing money? It doesn't make any sense um, from a business perspective, right? But when you think about it, the United States right now in this moment is $31 trillion in debt. They've been kicking this can down the road for so many years now. I remember when we crossed 20 trillion, and I thought at the time, man, that's the Rubicon right there. That's the point of no return. We're not ever going to come back from that. Well, it makes sense if you understand their end game, right? So for at least for BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard, they know the direction of where money is going. They know that it's going to become digitalized. It'll become centralized, and their partners, the Federal Reserves, not just our Federal Reserve, but Federal Reserves from around the world, are all going to make this big push into digital currency. And so from that standpoint, they know the dollar's dead anyways. They don't care that Disney's losing billions of dollars. They don't care that Bud Light's lost billions of dollars. All that's going to go away anyways. They're going to switch over to this new digital currency, and everybody's going to have to go along with it. Think about it this way: if tomorrow they announce that the U.S. government was completely bankrupt and the dollars, the monies that the currency that you have in your bank account is worthless, the dollars that you have hidden under your mattress or the money in your pocket or wherever it is absolutely worthless, and they're going to give the American people the facade of choice, and this facade is that this we can fix our economy, we can fix our currency, but tax rates are going to go up, 60 to 80%. Everybody is going to pay this huge tax increase on top of inflation, on top of everything else. And if we do this for, say, 20 years, we might be able to pay the balance back down to something that's manageable. That's option number one. Option number two is we go to a digital currency and you get to keep the lights on in your house. You get to keep using air conditioning. You get to keep using, going to Walmart and buying your groceries. You keep, getting the ability to buy gas or whatever. So this is the option. And which choice do you think we're going to go with? Do you think you're going to make the hard decision, pay down these debts, and take the make the hard choice to take a 60 to 80% tax increase, or keep everything going as it is? We're just going to switch currencies to this new central bank digital currency. I mean, of course, they're going to go with option two. They are not. The American people have been living in, all of us, myself included, we've been living this cush existence for so long now that the idea of really buckling down and paying down this insane debt that our government has been just spending like a drunken sailor, that's finally gotten to port after being out at sea for 6 months. You know what I mean? Like, of course, they're gonna take option two because nobody wants to make those hard hard decisions. Yeah, hey, I apologize, James. I know the sound is coming in and out. My internet here is sketchy, but with the silencing of truth, we've seen this from the government, particularly with the use of classification and classifying information at certain levels that the average American is no longer able to um, uh, access. And so even things that shouldn't be classified are being classified for the simple fact that nobody in the government wants to be held accountable for the things that are going on. So it's much easier just to classify something than it is to actually allow the public to read it. And then it takes, a Freedom of Information Act. It takes a lot of these huge legal hurdles just to get documents back out to the public. But even if you get them, they're redacted. I mean, most of the names or information in there is going to be the serious stuff is going to be redacted so that you can't really get a full understanding of what's going on. And so companies like Google and YouTube and um, Facebook, companies like that who aren't part of the government now, they don't have necessarily the ability to classify public information, but what they can do is they can censor it, they can shadow ban it, they can bury it or basically deplatform you, or say give you a strike, or whatever it is. And they're using these AI systems. It's not like you have people sitting there listening to every podcast that's ever created and going through word by word. They run all this video stuff through AI filters, and they'll pick out certain words, and then they'll go from there, and they'll basically decide whether or not to shadow ban or to whatever they're going to do, censor a particular program for violating one of their community standards. Stonewalling, if you've ever listened to one of the White House briefs and they get asked a very pointed question about something, and the White House press secretary will basically give every answer but the answer to the question that was asked, or they deflect, or they say that we're not really that's not really our department. You need to go see the Department of Defense, or you need to go talk to the Department of Housing or the Department of Energy, or whatever the case is. Um, they are very quick to not answer your question, and that just becomes the accepted norm. And if you're a reporter there in the press room and you begin to ask these hard questions, you're going to get kicked out and you're going to lose access to to be able to ask these questions to the government officials right away. So this is all forms of stonewalling and basically not giving you an answer, even when asked or pressed directly for an answer. And then lastly, we have this idea of the Hegelian dialectic, right? I didn't mention this in the article, but I've written about it a lot of times. The Hegelian dialectic is the thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. So, in the thesis is basically the statement of whatever the problem is. The antithesis is what's used to antagonize the situation so that people demand a solution, and the solution is gonna end up being the synthesis, which was known before they did anything. That was the original solution. They just had to get everybody on board with, demanding this solution, this fix, right? So, we've seen this over the last 20 years with, like, mass shootings. Every time there's a mass shooting, they don't care about the motive, they don't care why the guy or gal did what they did. It's always the gun. It's always, attacking the actual, tool that's used, and these guys are as silent as the grave when it comes to, terrorist events where a guy uses a car to plow into a crowd of people, or they use a pressure cooker to blow up, or they use knives, or they use just violence, bats and knives and bricks and whatever. These guys won't say a peep. But the minute somebody has a gun, even if that guy uses a gun in self-defense, man, it's always one direction. It is always against the Second Amendment. It's always fighting against that and using any excuse possible to get rid of it. So this is that Hegelian dialectic. They use these crises, and it's also a form of crisis management where they use these crises to manage an emergency. Because when something is an emergency, people aren't thinking rationally, they're thinking emotionally. And they're so shocked. If you go back to the idea of whatever the event is, a tragedy that starts a conspiracy theory, everybody's worked up about what happened. They're numb. They're just in a sense of shock of what just transpired. And so these politicians and these leaders are able to push very draconian things that normally people would not have allowed, their citizenry would not have allowed to happen, um, but the exception. And the best example of this is the Patriot Act. The fact that a bill as large as the Patriot Act could get passed in 30 days was only possible because of 9/11. I mean, 9/11 happened, 30 days later, the Patriot Act was passed both houses of Congress, had gone through all the normal steps that usually take bills years to go through, and then it was signed by President Bush back in, the end of October 2001. So and at the time, people don't think about it because they're so emotionally charged about what just happened, or they're so much in shock about the senseless tragedy of it, the anger that the population feels. And dude, politicians know this. This is why they do these things. They love to manage by crisis. You go from one crisis to another crisis to another crisis to another crisis. And when they do this, they are able to ram through all kinds of stuff. And before you know it, man, you've signed all your freedoms away. So, yeah, management by fear. Lastly, in this particular section, I wanna just talk about, um, go back a little bit to the exploitation. If you're BlackRock and you're State Street and Vanguard and you control, you know, 70% of the American economy, and you control all the pharmaceuticals, the military industrial complex, you control a lot of the food processing, companies, Kraft, Heinz, all those different companies, right? Um You control the medical industry, you control, um, uh, media, social media, and green energy. How do you make money when you control all that? You already control everything. How do you keep that going? Well, you create a need, right? So if you control the military industrial complex, you need wars. You need conflicts to use that military equipment. So those companies like Raytheon and Boeing and Lockheed Martin, so forth, can keep making the missiles and can keep making the planes and the jets and all this stuff because the threat is there, right? You know, if you are if you own the pharmaceutical companies, what do you need? What do you need if you control all the pharmaceutical companies? That's right, ready now. Sick people, sickness. If you control the mainstream media, what do you need? You need conflict, right? You need controversy. You need drama. If you control the food industry, what do you need? You need to make food that tastes really good, but is not healthy for you at all. But that serves the other industry that you control, which is the medical industry. Because now you get all these people that are dying and getting all these diseases from all the food they've been ingesting for the last 30 years that is absolutely terrible for you. And, you know, now you have a thriving medical industry because you got all these sick people. Yeah, they're poisoning the food. You know, I have a little bit of beef with this in particular. The government has spent so much money, and I'm not defending tobacco companies, but they've gone after the tobacco companies like the Ku Klux Klan. However, they will allow all these food companies to absolutely poison children's food, I mean, everything, and they won't lift a finger. In fact, these guys, all these companies have lobbyists. These lobbyists are going up there and just I mean, they're just, it's really, really sickening to see how I mean, there should be warning labels like they have on cigarettes, should have warning labels on all the food that you buy. This food causes stomach cancer. This food causes diabetes. I mean, I you talk about curbing how people start to eat. When you see that whatever your favorite can of soup is or whatever, and this thing has got human DNA in there or something or hot dogs, you think people are going to eat that? I mean, I mean, people will still eat it, but not as many. I mean, you'll start to see that curb the way people eat and shop, and the stuff that we sell in America. That's a good point, John W. I mean, the food that we buy here in America, they can't even be sold a lot of it can't be sold in Europe without being radically changed because the Europeans won't allow that's how toxic a lot of our food is. And I'm talking about things like Cheez-Its, you know, just normal run-of-the-mill food, white bread. I mean there is so much junk in our food and our water and the plastic that we put our drinks in. I mean, guys, it is you basically have to just go completely off the grid and grow all your own food in order to avoid all the stuff that they're putting in there. But I guarantee you, let's just say hypothetically that um, everybody let's say 50% of each state decided, hey, we're going to just start growing our own food. Then they'd ban gardening. They're going to ban gardening, and they're going to say that it's contributing to climate change, and they'll come up with some reason why gardening is absolutely terrible if they haven't already. If you have the green energy, if you control the green energy industry, what do you need? You need climate crisis, right? Climate crisis. So I just looked this up earlier. 2023, the total Canadian wildfires, it's in all 13 provinces, and as of August 2023, There is a total of 5,832 fires. It's burned 34,597,998 acres thus far. It's probably more than that. This was probably up until August. And where how are all these wildfires starting? I mean, surely this isn't the first dry year that we've ever had, or drier than average. I remember if you go to the guy on YouTube, Dutch Sense, and he all he does is mostly does earthquakes. He had satellite footage of the fire that was in Ontario. This was in June, the beginning of June, and you can see him. He's playing the satellite footage back and forth, and you can see that all of these fires started at the same time in Ontario. They started at the same exact time, and they were spread out all over the province. But as he was playing it forward, the smoke all came at the same time from all these different fires, like a dozen different fires. How does that happen? How does that happen naturally? It doesn't happen naturally. They need they need climate to be a crisis because it hasn't been and nobody's really uh it's kind of like in 2020 when they were saying how bad the you know what was going to be, but then you walk outside and you go out and you intermingle with everybody else and you know it's not at bad at all. Yeah, people were getting some people were getting sick, and but then they stayed home and they got over it. It had a 99% like survival rate, unless you had other comorbidities or something associated with that, and it just kind of piled on to what you already had. But they're creating the crisis right now with these wildfires, um, in order to expedite the need. And here's another thing I think is unnatural. This high pressure dome that's been over the center of the United States for the all summer. I mean, it is unnatural, in my opinion, how this high pressure center settled over these red states in the center of the United States, from Texas all the way up to North Dakota. This oppressive heat like crazy, and you see rain, rain, storm systems and stuff, and it's like they bounce off of this high pressure and they just go all the way around it. What is keeping that high pressure system there, and what's kept it there all summer? So that Texas has been in triple digits from like the end of May. I mean, I don't know. It seems unnatural to me. Maybe this is God doing this. Maybe this is just one of those freak years where there is a high pressure system that just settles on the center of the United States, or maybe it's HARP. Maybe it's um, them monkeying around with the weather. I don't know. It just doesn't seem right, you know. Anyways, they do all this stuff with the industries so they can profit off every woman and child from cradle to grave. And aside from the money they want to make off of you, it is a process of control. And they don't know this, they probably don't believe it, but they are essentially setting up the kingdom of the beast. And while as believers we are discerning of the times that we live in, and we can see because we've read the Bible, we understand what's being set up, and we know the direction the world's going into. We understand what's coming. And even the guys that run BlackRock or State Street or Vanguard, all those other places, they think they're just, they think that this is original to them, that this is their idea, that they are the ones controlling, like they're the masters of their fate. But in reality, they are being handled and managed by dark and nefarious forces that Paul says in Ephesians 6:12, that these are the principalities, the forces of wickedness that are basically driving these guys to do what they want them to do. And while we can't see all the pieces and everything seems chaotic right now, Satan is using this chaos to establish the kingdom of the beast. And as scary as that is, it is, at least for us, it's, I don't want to say it's good news because we're having to live through it, but we have a silver lining at the edge of this storm. We know that we're going to be delivered prior to this being set up. We don't know exactly when it's going to happen, but we know it's soon. We can see that day approaching. So I think if you're a believer tonight and you're listening to this, as terrifying as it seems at times, and as troubling and unsettling as it appears at times, we have the blessed hope that we can cling to, that we are not going to set one foot inside of the tribulation. Will things get rough prior to? Maybe. Um, I tend to think here in the West, at least in the United States, in order for the I know certain preachers are out there saying that, that the church is going to face severe persecution prior to the rapture. I tend to disagree. Right now, most of the church in America is dead asleep. Why would Satan mess that up? He's got the church exactly where he wants them. He knows the minute he starts really pressing on them and persecuting them, that Christians are gonna get off the fence and they're gonna go either hot or cold. They're not gonna just stay lukewarm. And we see that with the church of Laodicea. If that is the age in which we live, which I believe it is, then the church is lukewarm. She is indifferent to the things going on. So there is persecution in pockets in small places, primarily in like really blue states. But for the most part, most Christians are just dead asleep. They don't they think things are just going to go back to normal someday. So Satan has the church right where he wants them. At least the professing Christendom, not the true born again believing church. But um, you think about 2020, how many churches just shut their doors and did everything the government told them, you know, just went along with it. And even now, they still, if it happens again next month or the month after or whenever, they're just going to do it again because they don't study prophecy. They don't understand that this is all happening in real time. That the kingdom of the beast is being established because they don't take Revelation seriously. They don't take Bible prophecy seriously. So for them, it's just, we'll get through this, and it's just a cycle. We'll come back around, and things will become normal in the next 20, 30 years. That's just how they see it. So that was the article. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope that it gave you something to think about and the way to look at problems. Um, and again, I'm not saying that everything bad that happens is a conspiracy. Um, but what I am saying is that every crisis that's ever come up, at least in the last 50 years, has somehow been used. That politicians will absolutely use crises to um, push some agenda. So they will never pass up the opportunity to use a crisis to push some agenda. They may not cause the problem, but they are certainly going to take advantage of it. In closing this section, I just want to read from Titus 2 11 through 15. For the grace of God that brings salvation has appeared to all men, teaching us that denying ungodliness and worldly lust, we should live soberly, righteously, and godly in the present age, looking for the blessed hope and glorious appearing of our great God and Savior Jesus Christ, who gave himself for us that he might redeem us from every lawless deed and purify himself his own special people, zealous for good works. Speak these things, exhort, rebuke with all authority, and let no one despise you. So, all right. Uh, Man, I've been talking for almost an hour. All right, so I'm going to go to questions here. Let me get these out. Uh, all right, let's see. Oh man. Okay. Pete, will you please talk about what happens to our animals after the rapture? Praying they go with us. Worried about my dogs. This is from Corey. I don't know how to say your last name. Sorry. T sort? I don't know. Hey, so I don't I don't believe that animals are raptured. I don't believe they're raptured, but I do believe that God cares about our animals. I mean, obviously, He created nature, He created animals for a purpose. Um, he cares about the sparrow, right? I think what happens, I mean, I have 8 dogs, and I hate the thought of leaving them here, but I think what happens is that most of them will probably not survive the 7-year tribulation, either through natural disasters or just, whatever happens. But I do believe that we'll have them again in the kingdom. And you gotta think about the kingdom age. I mean, like, if you've ever lost a dog or had to put a dog to sleep or a cat or, whatever the pet was, um, I believe that we'll see those animals again in the kingdom age. I mean, the whole world is gonna be terraformed and made into a paradise. I mean, it's gonna be just, I believe, covered with animals. The wolf lying down with the lamb, the lion with the calf, and snakes. Everything is gonna be restored back to its perfect order. And, I know God knows how much we care about our animals. I mean, for many people, it's their lifeline, it's the only, um especially for older folks who, live by themselves and they just have their cat or dog or whatever the case is. And, I'm 100% in the belief that we will have those animals with us in the kingdom, and they will live forever, for 1,000 years or longer into eternity in their glorified, not glorified dog bodies or whatever, but in whatever the immortal bodies that animals will have. They won't die. They'll be the perfect dog that they were supposed to be, or, if your dog was a little overweight and had a gimpy leg and had a bad back or something, and the hips were going out, that dog's gonna be restored to perfect health. But I don't think I'm almost positive they don't go up in the rapture with us. So, now, does that mean that, let's say you're, at the store and you left your dog caged up in a cage because, you can't leave him out while you're gone? Does that mean that an angel doesn't come over there and open the cage door for him? I don't know. I would think so, but, there's definitely enough angels to do that all around the world while we're up in, being caught up to Christ and, um, going through the bema judgment, but we will not be raptured. The animals will not be raptured. But I do believe that God cares about them and that we will have them again in the kingdom. James Wells asked, question, will those who are backslid from the Lord at the rapture, which I deem not ready, are they taken anyways? I believe that everybody that's born again will be taken, regardless of the state of sanctification that they're in, wherever they are in that process. If they're born again, they are a new creation in Christ. And that means even if they're backslidden, if they were truly born again, I believe they will be caught up. And, obviously that factors into what happens at the Bema judgment and so on and so forth. So, but when Paul was talking to the Corinthian church, he called them brothers and sisters in Christ, and they had all kinds of problems. They were having all kinds of struggles in that church. Um, that doesn't mean that, Christ wants us to be backslidden or that he okays it. He doesn't. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying that if, let's say, somebody got saved in 2020 for whatever reason, and it was truly a born again conversion, and then something happens to them and they just kind of it triggers something in them, and they're reeling from it. Maybe they backslide into drugs or alcohol or something, or some kind of begetting sin, and then the Lord comes back at that moment. I mean, they're still born again. They're still changed into a new creation. So yeah, they go up. I don't believe in the partial rapture theory. A sister prayer warrior for Jesus Christ asked, could Trump be the Antichrist? His father, Frederick Christ, mother Mary, Aunt Elizabeth, and cousin John mimicking Jesus' family. He was also born on a blood moon. If you're asking me what I think, I don't think he is. No. The Antichrist, according to Daniel 9:26, has to come out of the old Roman Empire. Um, and I believe that Trump is too um, polarizing as a personality to really rally the whole world behind him. Whoever this Antichrist is going to be, he's going to be more like Obama when Obama first got elected. And I mean, everywhere he went, he had this huge thronging crowds everywhere. They had the pillars on the stage, and um, people were basically calling him a messiah. So it'll definitely be more like Obama than Trump. Becky asked, Pete, does Pete believe in direct energy weapons? Yes, I believe they are real. I believe they've been used. Lynette asked, who do you think are Satan's top power brokers in the world? Well, I mean, Satan has got different power brokers for different areas. Do I think that Larry Fink is one of those guys, or Bill Gates, or even Elon Musk or somebody? Sure. Yeah. I mean, they're doing what he wants them to do. Um, as well as the Pope and anybody else that's leading people away from Christ that are in positions of great authority. And I tend to think that most people, I'd say probably about 98% of all leaders in the world that arise to that level of leadership, um, are, I'm not saying they're all Satan worshipers. I'm just saying that Satan has placed them in those positions for particular reasons. Seen and known asked, what events have surprised you the most in the first half of the year? Just trying to think back to like January. Seems like forever ago. So much has happened in this time. That's hard. I guess it would have to be this Maui fire, you know, and it's not even fully done. I mean, they're still going through all the processes of finding missing people and children and everything like that. So, um, that was very shocking to me that happened the way it did. The only other time, only two other times I've been like this shocked, and one time was in I want to say it was in 2010 or 2011. Whenever the Japanese tsunami hit, I was writing an article. Um, we were stationed in San Antonio at the time, and I was up late writing an article, and I had the TV kind of off to the side. It was on Fox or something, and the volume was all the way down. I just kept seeing the flash alert thing, and I glanced over there, and it said that they had a an 8.0 earthquake or something, 8.5, and they kept adjusting the number up. And then, that's not uncommon there, so I kept working, and then every time I glanced over there was, like, more and more damage, and and then you start seeing the footage of the tsunami hitting, and people are driving on the street, and then the guy in the helicopter is watching it, and he's seeing that water, this wall of water racing toward this car, and they probably didn't even know it was coming at them. And, I mean, the amount of destruction in that was shocking to me. Um, before that, obviously, being like 9/11. Um, I remember being pretty shocked at Princess Diana dying the way she did. I don't know why that hit me the way it did, but I was very, um, I don't know, it seemed very so tragic, you know. But this year, just trying to think back to January, we've had so much happen. We've had UFO disclosures, we've had Chinese weather balloons, we've had Trump indicted 4 times, we've had, the this fire here in Maui, we've had all the Canadian wildfires, um, the I mean, I guess this Maui fires really surprised me how it's all turned out and how it's still turning out, and we don't really know what the total death toll is gonna be just yet. Tamara asked, "Do you think the Psalm 83 war is setting up the normalization agreements are happening between the surrounding enemies of Israel?" Oh, okay, I see what you said. Do you think the Psalm 83 war is setting up as the normalization agreements are happening between the surrounding enemies of Israel? Tamara asked that. No, I don't think the Psalm 83 is being ramped up because of the normalization. I think the Psalm 83 war that seems very impending right now is being set up because Satan is stirring up the enemies of Israel because of things like the red heifers and um, the Jews are now becoming emboldened to go to the Temple Mount, and now they're much more of the government now is pressing to build a third temple, and it seems much more on the precipice that we might actually start to see the beginning of this happen. And I think that's why Satan is stirring up the enemies to prevent that from he doesn't want the end times to start. He doesn't want this to happen because he knows once it does, he's only got a very he's only got a small window of time to operate in, so he's trying to extend this out as long as possible. But the Jews as of 2017, once the United States recognized Jerusalem as Israel's eternal capital, and once we moved our embassy there, it seemed like things began to really kind of speed out of control. And we've all the things we've seen since then, COVID and all that, has been because of that. And Satan is trying to delay this as much as possible so that he has more time to set up his kingdom. And so I think that's the cause of why we're seeing Hezbollah being stirred up the way they are, Hamas and all the offshoots and factions that are starting to really become like a hornet's nest that's being agitated, right? Satan is agitating these hornet's nests around Israel to prevent them from getting any further along in building their temple than they already are. Can you hear me, guys? Thumbs up. Okay. Did you guys hear me about why I thought Psalm 83 is going to happen? Okay. BPNE question: do you based on Ephesians 1:10, which states the rapture as the fullness of times, that means that the fullness of the Gentiles will go through the tribulation? Is that in Ephesians? Pull out my Bible here. That in the dispensation of the fullness of times he might gather together one all things in Christ, both which are in heaven and which are on the earth in him. Um, so there's two kind of fullnesses going on here. You have the fullness of times, which we see here, and I believe in Romans. Okay, Romans is the fullness of the Gentiles, and then in Luke 21:28, I believe, it says the or Luke 21:24. Okay. So Luke 21:24 says, "And they will fall by the edge of the sword and be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem will be trampled by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled." So I believe this times of the Gentile being fulfilled is going to go into the tribulation because obviously the Antichrist is going to set up shop there. Gentiles going to be there in Jerusalem. The temple is going to be desecrated and so on and so forth. Armageddon. They're going to all the armies of the world are going to mass on the valley of Megiddo. So the fullness of the Gentiles goes through the tribulation. Romans 11:25. For I do not desire, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you should be wise in your own opinion, that blindness in part has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. So in Luke 21:24, it says, until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. That talks all the way through the end. The blindness on part on Israel is going to happen until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in, right? Not that it's fulfilled, but it has come in, so that it's kind of reached its peak, if you will. And then here in Ephesians 1:10, it says that in the dispensation of the fullness of times, he might gather together in one all things. So I believe that this fullness of times is where we are at right now because you have Israel back in the land, you have convergence happening on steroids. I mean, it is just everything, every sector of the beast kingdom that needs to be set up is being actively being built upon right now. All the stage setting is happening. There really isn't much left that has to happen if the rapture happened today, for the beast kingdom to set up in just a few short months, or at least to begin in a few short months. So um, I think after the rapture, there is going to definitely be some chaos, and the world leaders are going to scramble and basically come up with this whole 10 region plan. But so I do believe right now we are in the fullness of times. We know that when the fullness of the Gentiles has come in, the blindness in part will happen or will be lifted from Israel. And I believe that's around the midpoint of the tribulation where they begin to flee and to Petra or wherever they're going to flee to. But the fullness of the Gentiles being fulfilled won't happen till the end of the 70th week because the Gentiles are going to trample Jerusalem throughout the all 7 years. So I hope that makes sense. Rafiki S asks, according to Genesis 3:22, why was Adam and Eve created without knowing good and evil? And Satan was right because their eyes were open, which is what he told Eve. Yeah, but Satan mixes truth with lies. He also told Eve that she wouldn't die, which of course she would once she ate of that fruit. But they were created in a state of innocence. They weren't created perfect, but they were created in a state of innocence because God gave them free will. And so there had to be something for that free will. If there wasn't a tree in the middle of the garden for them not to touch, then there really wouldn't be free will because there's not anything to exercise that free will with. They had to make that decision. Now, of course, God knew what was going to happen, but God does not create evil, and He created Adam and Eve. And they were perfect, and He said they were good. So they were good, created in a state of innocence, and they were also given free will. And then they were given the one rule not to violate, and then they violated it. So Satan did was truthful in that matter, but he also lied. And so he mixed truth with error, which he always does with everything. If Eve had left the fruit alone in 5,900 years, she could have had McDonald's. Yeah. Stefan asked, oh, how does government get out of debt just by switching currency? Well, if we think back to history, we can think the U.S. Currency has changed about somewhere around a dozen times the kind of dollars we use, and pretty soon that currency is phased out. It's no longer used. I think about like Confederate dollars. After the Civil War, Confederate dollars were no longer valid. They were no longer legal tender. Um, I think we're going to get to that point where our currency is just not going to be worth anything anymore, and we're going to switch over to this new system. And this new system is already being integrated right now with the Fed coin, which now, I mean, really, anytime this year or the next, definitely, if we're still here by the end of 2024, this digital currency will be taking up half the economy, if not more, because people are going to start using it, and people may be incentivized to use it. Um, for instance, if they decide to push this universal basic income, and they say, hey, if you switch over to this currency, we'll pay you 2,000 credits a month or whatever they're called. I don't know what the digital dollars are going to be called, but um, they're just going to phase this currency out. Now, as far as the debt goes, um, I believe everybody is going to understand the government's going to have to file some kind of bankruptcy. I don't know how governments file bankruptcy, but they declare um, the old system is. I don't know exactly how they're going to do it. I just know it's going to be like when you file bankruptcy and you say, "Hey, I can't pay my bills." Your debts are kind of just negotiated down or absolved into something else, or it's. We look back at Greece. This happened to Greece in 2010. Greece went bankrupt, whatever they call it for a nation. Basically, they just had to work out some kind of a paying arrangement and restructuring. So they'll they're trust me, they're already working on how to do this across every sector. But the big thing about the debts, and I want you guys to understand, we do have debts to other nations. China, Japan, other countries are debt holders for us, but the largest shareholder of our debt is our children. They've been printing money and borrowing against our children's benefits and our grandchildren. So we've been borrowing against ourselves for so long that if the Lord doesn't come back, let's just say hypothetically the Lord's not coming back for 1,000 years, um, our children will I mean, the country is going to absolutely change by the time that I'm 50, almost 50 now, but I'm 49. By the time I would get to retire, there wouldn't even be a retirement for me anymore. It would be something completely different, some kind of universal basic income, digital credit, coin, whatever. Um, it's going to completely change. So it's not like the debts will just have to get absolved or absorbed into something else. But Lynette asks again, do you really think that masks are coming back, or is it just a cause, or it's just to cause anxiety? I do think they're coming back. I guess we'll see in September, though. I mean, if you go to the airport and TSA guys are starting to wear masks again, then we'll know that the report that Alex Jones got is pretty accurate. And I will say this: I mean, Alex Jones is based on the information he receives has come true a lot. So we'll see. Valhalloran asks, are you hearing lockdowns are coming in September, October? Yes. Willis Martin, Pete, can you speak briefly about the Cloward and Piven strategy? Yeah, Cloward and Piven, basically, were two Marxists back in the '60s that came up with this idea of overwhelming the system, um, in order to break our current form of government. And we almost did that in the '60s with we got involved in the Vietnam conflict, and then at the same time, LBJ passed the Great Society Act, which uh, allowed the expansion of government subsistence to single mothers, welfare, all that stuff. And between those two things, it quickly ballooned up so that by the time Nixon took over, he had to get us off the gold standard because we could our currency was going to become insolvent back then. And so we went to a free floating debt-based currency. And the idea was as long as we could keep our debt manageable, we'd be okay. And it lasted for, you know, from Nixon's time to about the 1990s, I guess, is when we started to start seeing all these really big shutdowns with government not being able to come up with a plan, you know, especially under like Newt Gingrich when he was the Speaker of the House and Clinton was in office and they were trying to balance the budget and all that. Yeah, I think from about that time forward, we've really been in a bad situation economically, and that kind of metastasized in the mortgage industry in 2008 when Fannie Mae and um, what was it, Bernie, uh, Dodd Franks, and then Freddie Mac. Yeah. So when all that stuff started to happen, I mean that was it. I mean we were kind of done then. Not Bernie Franks, the investment bank that they let collapse. I want to say Bernstein or mm, Enron. Yep, Bernie Madoff. Yeah, it wasn't Bernie. Yeah, Lehman Brothers. That's what it is. Sorry, Lehman Brothers collapsed. They let that fold. That's right around the time that BlackRock started to make their move. Katie Ann says, "What I meant is that I don't trust Alex Jones. I don't. I mean, he's a post-trib guy. He is 100% post-trib. He believes we're going to go through the tribulation. So I don't agree with him on that. But on a lot of things that he's talked about, he's been right. Turning the frogs gay, Epstein Island. Um, I mean, just I don't know all of the things he said, but he's usually ahead of the curve on a lot of this stuff. And Mrs. John Johnson, yep, 1913, the creation of the Federal Reserve. That definitely was the foundation for our downfall. But um, we've we've been kicking the can down the road for a long time. We've run out of road now. So Bohemian Grove, yeah. Lynette, do you think some of the weather stuff is God's doing, showing them who really controls the weather, or is man manipulated? I don't know. I think because all the states that have had this really oppressive heat have all been largely Republican states, it seems, I don't know. I don't know. It just seems weird to me. That's all I'm saying. That we've had this just triple digit weathers all summer. That is, I can't remember a time like that. And it's not rained. And all the rain just goes all around this big high pressure dome, you know? It just it seems bizarre. I don't maybe it's all the smoke from the Canadian wildfires that's causing that or, you know, making it worse or something. I don't know. Um, Kevin Douglas, do you think aluminum in the sky has anything to do with the extra heat? Possibly. There was a guy I remember seeing a video. He lived in Michigan or Minnesota or somewhere. It's on Instagram somewhere. And he had a some kind of detector that detects like chemicals or whatever. You know, like you can have one for your house for natural gas, if you had a natural gas leak, or carbon monoxide, those kind of testers or whatever. And he's inside his house and it's reading 0, and then he opens the door, goes outside, and you can just see it's completely smoky out there. Um, and, obviously, they're one of the first states gonna get the blower from all this, wildfires, and he's the thing is just pegging out, and it's going in the whatever the it's reading the what it's reading is like formaldehyde, and, just I mean, so much stuff is coming out, so much weird stuff that you just don't know what to believe anymore. There was a video going around that I shared with a few people, but um, when you look at the picture of Maui and the wildfire, it seems like anything that's blue, I mean, just random blue things are not burnt, but like everything else around it's like charred, just melted to the ground. And so they tested this like laser, this powerful laser that's powerful enough to like cause a fire as soon as it hits something. And they went through all these different color cloths. There was green, yellow, red, and it just as soon as it hit it, it burned it. It started to burn right through it. And then it got to the blue and would not burn it at all. And then they went over to the next color and it was like green and it just completely started to burn through it. And then it go back to blue and nothing. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Let's read through some of the comments. All right. Tracy Weller, question: the day of the Lord, 2 Peter 3:10. If the whole earth is destroyed, how are all the people left after the great tribulation going to survive for the millennial kingdom? Also, what are we doing? Let's go there. So after the tribulation, we know that the tribulation is 7 years long, and we know that there is some extra days at the end of it. I think like 45 additional days. And then it's going to move into the sheep and goat judgment, or maybe that happens during that time period. And there are going to be survivors, both Jews and Gentiles, that will physically, that aren't cast into outer darkness, that are going to physically be alive to enter into the kingdom. Now, I believe that the kingdom here is a restored earth. So you won't have the Sahara Desert, you won't have Antarctica, you won't have these places that are uninhabitable anymore. To basically, the world's going to be restored back to like it was at the beginning. Maybe different in the sense that the continents may remain where they are versus the way it was in the beginning. But the world is going to become utopia again. Just a paradise. We don't see that the world doesn't get burned with fire or purged with fire until the end of the millennial kingdom. So when you go to Revelation 21, it says, "Now I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and also there was no more sea." So I think that's what Second Peter 3:13 is alluding to, that this is going to happen at the very end. So we know that during the millennial kingdom that Christ rules on the earth. The church, we rule and reign with him. We are going to be, depending on our faithfulness in this life and the things that we did, is going to be, some are going to be over a city, some over 10 cities, whatever. But during this kingdom age, the earth's population is going to just balloon to, we're at 8 billion now. It's probably going to be triple that during the kingdom age. But there it will absolutely be no overcrowding, because now there's gonna be places that we can't live in now are now gonna be habitable. So all of, like, say, North Africa, all of the Antarctica or, you know, the northern places, Siberia, all those places are gonna be very pleasant to live in. So you'll be able to live wherever you want, but the church is gonna be ruling and reigning with Christ during that time. And at the end of the 1,000 years, we know Satan is loosed for a short season, and we don't know how long that season is, but it's enough time for him to gather this massive army and try to wage one last battle against Christ, and they are immediately destroyed. And this is what ushers in the eternal age, right? Um, well, that ushers in the great white throne judgment, and then the eternal age. But here in verse or chapter 21, verse 1, it says, and then now I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. Also, there was no more sea. And if you listen to, I've read Lee Brainer's book on the new heaven, new earth, is it recreation or restoration? I tend to agree with them that the earth is gonna be purged with fire. It's still gonna be the same earth, but everything is gonna be burnt up and it's gonna become new, right? The same thing with the heavens. All of the heavens will be purged with fire, but we're still gonna have the sun there. We're still gonna have the moon. We're still gonna have the planet that we lived on. The place where Christ was crucified will always be like this hollowed um, piece of history that for all eternity we'll have to go and visit and look at it and ponder and think about and wonder that that was that one piece of Earth's territory, piece of land right there where Christ's cross stood, made all of this possible, right? All of us being there, you know. So um, that is where I see the earth being purged with fire, and just like the world was destroyed with water the first time in the flood, the earth didn't disappear; it was still there. It was just purged with water. Now this time it's gonna be purged with fire, and the earth's still gonna be there, but what's gonna come out of it is gonna be all the evil, all the wickedness, all the things buried in the ground, all the whatever, all that stuff's gonna be removed, but the earth will still be there. And there are so many passages in the Old Testament, speaking about the sun being there forever, the moon being there forever. Now we won't need the sun anymore, but that doesn't mean it won't be there. And it's not gonna affect us like it was before. It may just be dimmed down and it's like a star, you know? But the eternality of these, and especially in Jeremiah 31, where it talks about the Jewish people, that as long as the sun remains and the moon, that his statutes will remain forever with these people, right? All right. Tammy Wright asks, question, have you thought about the next 3 days, BRICS creating new economic and trade systems separate from the US and the West, and compare to Exodus 5 when Pharaoh made the Israelis make bricks with supply of straw? I personally don't see any correlation with the name bricks and like the Tower of Babel or the Exodus or anything like that. I don't really think that BRICS whatever they're doing right now is going to amount to. It's not going to change the general trajectory of where the world's heading to. The world we're in today is heading toward the world of Revelation 13. That's the world that's going to happen. And between now and then, we know that the Gog Magog conflict is going to happen, and that's going to take out Russia as a power broker in the world, right? So the BRICS is now going to be the BICS, you know, the Brazil, India, China, South Africa, plus whatever countries they add to it. Um, we know that China is going to be around at least into the second half of the tribulation, because they're going to amass this massive army along with the kings of the East, probably India, China, and Japan, all those countries there, and they're going to march west towards Jerusalem, initially against the Antichrist, but then they're going to be rallied for battle by these demonic frog spirits that are going to gather the kings of the earth to meet in the valley of Megiddo. So India and China seem to be players in the end. Russia does not seem to be a player in the end, because they seem to be kind of neutralized at the Gog Magog conflict. Islam as a militant religion seems to be neutralized at Gog Magog. So I don't put that much stock into what's going on with BRICS right now. I think right now it's going to present a challenge and may push the West even faster into digitalizing their currency, if anything. They know right now the United States dollar is um, it's on its last legs, so it's not going to last much longer. So if we were trying to keep the dollar in play, even let's just say hypothetically Trump wins and he completely bans digital currency, the rest of the world's going to keep moving towards digital currency. We'll be the only country not using it or not using it at the government level, which will greatly impact our standing in the world. So, I mean, there's a dozen different ways this could play out, but ultimately the world's going to head toward the world of Revelation 13. And I personally don't see a lot happening with the BRICS in terms of um, being power brokers in this. The only way that they could be is if the United States collapses, and then the BRICS countries, and then the Western countries, led by the United Nations, the WEF, all these Western-backed entities, they form between them, they form this kind of alliance. But we still got to take out Russia during Gog Magog, so um, it's not going to look exactly like we think it's going to look like. Cherry asked, what do you think about JD's comments that we are out of here before 9:25? I love that. I was going to mention that earlier. If you hadn't heard his message, definitely go back and listen to it. I hope he's right. I hope he is right. That's all I hope. If he's not, then we know that we're still going to be here a little bit, but we know that it could happen at any time. So he seems fairly convinced. He's looking at the signs of the times, and he's the Lord speaking to him. So I don't know. Maybe he's got a better inside track on this than I do. But I hope he's right. That's all I can say. Okay. Emmanuel Rodriguez Gonzalez asked, "Hey Pete, have you heard of Tim Cohen and his theory that Charles is the Antichrist? He has a pretty good theory, but I stopped listening when he said the church will face the tribulation." Yeah, I've listened to him a few times. My number one issue with Charles being the Antichrist is his age. Um, I mean, Charles is 70, I think he's 75 right now. So let's just say hypothetically that he is the Antichrist and then he goes all 7 years into the tribulation. He'll be 82 at the end of it. I don't think the Antichrist is going to be that old. I mean, the Antichrist is going to be running the world. He's going to be constantly traversing the world and doing all sorts of things. I don't think an 82-year-old man, even if he's demon possessed, is going to have that kind of capability. He might have the willingness, he's just not gonna have the physical capability. Look at Biden. I mean, Biden can't even walk on flat ground without falling over, or wearing a diaper and all this stuff that he's gotta do. I personally don't think that's one reason is the age. The second reason is King Charles is about charming as a brown towel. I mean, he just is nobody really cares what he says. I mean, he's not this charismatic uh, figure that people uh, follow after and stuff. Um, Now, Tim wrote this book in the '90s, and I think had Charles become king then, let's say that Queen Elizabeth didn't live as long as she did, he might have had a valid point, but his theory now is 20 years old and or 20 plus years old. I just think he's holding on to this idea that isn't that's it's already expired a long time ago. and the fact that he thinks we're post-trib, or, we're going into the tribulation. He's already messed up on his eschatology. So, okay. Corey Ritchie. Hi, Pete, from Surrey, British Columbia, Canada. Can you please touch on the seven churches again, whether condemned, appraised, or Laodicean? Thanks. God bless. Absolutely. Um, I'm doing the seven letters to the seven. I have all these Revelation videos. I have chapters 1, 2, and 3. Actually, I have a why prophecy, why Revelation, and then chapter 1, and then I have 7 videos after that covering all the churches. Um, and I'm in the process of uploading them to YouTube right now. It's taking forever because my internet's like super slow, and I'm having to edit them first, get them into the best quality I can, and then from there, upload them to YouTube, and then I'm gonna link those to my website. I was trying to upload them to my website, but it was taking way too long, so I just thought I'd do it here and then link to it to the website. It'd be a lot faster. But just a quick overview of the 7 letters to the 7 churches. So we have Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamos, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. The 2 churches where Christ has nothing negative to say is Smyrna and Philadelphia. The one church that Christ has nothing positive to say about is Laodicea. Now, Ephesus, Smyrna, and Pergamos, the challenge and the promise are they go. Let me go there real quick. I mean, I pull out stuff like this for this. It's not like super, super in depth, but I do like to talk about some of the cool things about these 7 letters. Um, the challenge is he who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. This is to the church of Ephesus, the first church there. And then the promise is to him who overcomes, I will give to eat from the tree of life, which is in the midst of the paradise of God. Well, the first 3 churches, you have the challenge, and then you have the promise. And then the last 4 churches, it's reversed at the end. You have the promise, then the challenge. So why they're reversed like that, I don't know. It seems to indicate that there is a change in the churches as we go through time. And I tend to believe that the churches are prophetic because of the order that they're placed in. Now, my theory wouldn't be worth a hill of beans if like the first letter was to the church of Laodicea, or if they were in any other order than they are, my theory wouldn't hold any water. But the order that they were given to us, it seems to indicate that this would cover the last 2,000 years of the church being on the earth, the different ages of the church, the eras of the church that have dominated the world. And it seems like the last 4 churches are all overlapping each other, but they're real churches. They were real there in 95 AD when John received the revelation. We know it was 95 AD because Irenaeus says it was toward the end of the reign of Domitian. Irenaeus was a disciple of Polycarp. Polycarp was a disciple of John. That is the best eyewitness we can get to at this time. I mean, everybody else later on down the road, the only other people that have challenged that, the next people that begin to challenge that was like in the 5th century. And then, you have preterists now who are saying, no, 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 revelation happened in 60 AD or 65 or whatever. And that's impossible. There's a lot of reasons why it's impossible. Um, and that it doesn't make any sense. But it's like the silver bullet for the preterist is this testimony by Irenaeus saying that the John received the apocalypse at the end of the reign of Domitian. But Domitian reigned from either 82 or 84 AD to 96 AD. He died in 96. So if Irenaeus, who was a disciple of Polycarp, says that it was, he has way better. He's much closer to the event than anybody else later that came along challenging it. So he would know. I mean, he would know. This guy would know. So, anyways, Ephesus is the apostolic church. Smyrna, the ante-Nicene church, which means the prior to the Council of Nicaea. The Church of Pergamos was the post-Nicene and what we'd call pre-Catholic. And then the Church of Thyatira represents the Roman Catholicism, Sardis, the Protestant Reformation, Philadelphia, the Evangelical Missionary Church, and then Laodicea would be the postmodern church of the last 50, 60, 70 years. So, but yeah, I think I answered that question. But yeah, these will be given in detail in in those videos that I'll post here shortly. Let's see. Carol Vay's with us. Hey, Carol. Question: Can you clarify Revelation 22:5 about there shall be no more night or no need for sunlight? Will there still be sun, moon, and stars? Thanks. Yes, I believe that there will still be sun, moon, and starlight, but we won't need them. If you go back to Genesis, during the creation week, and God said, "Let there be light," that was on day. Let me read it so I don't mess it up. First day, God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And he called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And then we get to day 4 is when he creates the sun, moon, and stars. So there was light and darkness before the stars and moons were ever even created. So the fact that those can be in existence and we won't need them in Revelation 21 and 22 seems almost irrelevant because we don't need that. We don't need that light. We already God's going to give us the light. There's also going to be light from the new Jerusalem and so we're not going to need the sun, moon, and stars to provide us anything, but I think they'll still be there. All right. David Jack says, I agree with your take over Lee's, who disagrees, but we'll see from up in heaven. I don't know what that is in relation to, David. Uh, yeah, Lynette, the first church where we see a promise of Christ coming is in the church of, I want to say Thyatira. So the church of Thyatira, it says, it's the first mention of great tribulation. And then it says the promise to, or the admonition to them is hold fast what you have till I come. The message to Pergamos was, if they don't change, hold on, I'm texting my wife here real quick. He says, repent or else I will come to you quickly and I will fight against them with the sword of my mouth. I believe that is a promise of judgment, not the coming, like the second coming. But we see the promise there in Thyatira, hold fast until I come. We see the warning there to Sardis, saying, if you don't watch, I'm gonna come, and I'm gonna come like a thief, and you're not gonna know when I'm gonna when I'm gonna show up. Um, then we have the promise there in Philadelphia, obviously, Rev 3:10. Um, because you've kept my command, I will keep you from the hour of the trial which shall come upon the whole world. And then we have in Laodicea the absolute kind of just rejection, and then say, I'll vomit you out of my mouth because you're neither hot nor cold. Um, but he says, to him who overcomes, I'll grant with to sit with me on the throne, and I also overcame and sat down with my father on his throne. So it seems like from Thyatira on, there's always this message of coming, that he's going to come, and um, he's going to come again. Yeah, I like that, Lynette. Let's see. Could you bet Brooke Sabelos asked, could you better explain the different resurrections, i.e., Old Testament saints versus church versus tribulation saints? So when the Old Testament saints died, they or when anybody in the Old Testament prior to Christ's death, burial, and resurrection, when they died, they went to Hades, and Hades was divided up into two sections. You had torments and you had paradise, or Abraham's bosom. Um, when Christ ascended to heaven on the third day, he brought with those saints in the paradise side. He brought with them to heaven, and they are in heaven now, but in their spirit bodies. Right now, Christ obviously resurrected. He is the firstborn of the resurrection. He's the first one that is taken on this glorified form that we see in Revelation chapter 1 that John sees. Now, he's going to be forever in this form. Now, Jesus was pre-existing in the Old Testament. He's eternal, right? He's always been there. But the form that he took now in the person or the man of Jesus is the form that he will always be in. He'll always have the nail scarred hands and the scars on his head, presumably from the crown of thorns and the beatings and stuff, as a testimony to what he did. And we see that in Revelation chapter 5. So you guys still with me? Let me make sure I didn't drop off or anything. But when he comes for his church, and he comes to the atmosphere, First Thessalonians 4, we those who are dead in Christ, so those people that have died since Christ's resurrection, what we call the church age saints, they are in heaven now in their spirit bodies as well. Their bodies will be raised from the ground or from the sea or wherever they were, and they will be joined with their spirits to become their immortal, glorified bodies that they'll live in forever. This is the church age saints. And then we who are alive are going to be translated from mortal to immortal, from corruptible to incorruptible. And together we will go up as one body of believers, right? Christ is the head, we are the body. Now, the Old Testament saints, in terms of the resurrection, says here, chapter 20 and verse 4. And I saw thrones, and they sat on them, and judgment was committed to them. Then I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded for their witness to Jesus, for the word of God, who would not worship the beast or his image, nor received his mark. And they lived and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. But the rest of the dead did not live again until the 1,000 years were finished. And this is the first resurrection. So I believe that the Old Testament saints, if you go back to Daniel 12, also are resurrected somewhere in this time period. It may be in that 45 days right as after the tribulation ends, because what it, it doesn't make any sense for the Old Testament saints, right, to not be in their physical bodies and not receive the kingdom that was promised to them all throughout the Old Testament, if that makes sense. The kingdom is what they understood was the end. That was what they understood what the end state was. And it doesn't make any sense for them to be left in their spirit bodies during the time that they were promised this whole kingdom age that they had been looking forward to in Isaiah 2, Isaiah 11, Isaiah 66, uh, Ezekiel 40 through 48. I mean, all of the passages that speak to the kingdom age, the kingdom, this is what was this is what they've been looking forward to, right? Because this is all they knew. So when you go to Daniel 12, in verse 2, let me start with verse 1. At that time, Michael shall stand up, the great prince who stands watch over the sons of your people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that time. And at that time, your people shall be delivered, every one who is found in the book. So here, Gabriel is telling Daniel that at the end, the nation of Israel is going to go through such a time that's never existed. I mean, it's going to be so perilous and so troubling. We know that as the 70th week, that is the tribulation. And here it says that they're going to be even to that time, and at that time your people shall be delivered. So at the midpoint, God on the wings of eagles is going to deliver them and move them somewhere safely till the end. And so they shall be delivered. But here in verse 2 it says, and many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life and some to shame and everlasting contempt. But those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the firmament, and those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. I believe here that when it says many of those who sleep, so those that had already died, these Old Testament saints whose spirits are now in heaven, they're going to be resurrected, and this is all part of the first resurrection still. Um, and they're going to have to everlasting life, and those that have everlasting life are going to shine like the brightness of the firmament, right, and like the stars forever and ever. So they're going to be resurrected. And then when it says some to shame and everlasting contempt, those are going to be resurrected at the end of the millennial kingdom, at the great white throne judgment. That's part of this second resurrection or last, and that's where all the wicked of all time are going to be resurrected and then stand before God at the great white throne judgment. So I believe that the Old Testament saints are going to be resurrected in their bodies, their physical, glorified bodies in time to go and serve in the kingdom as well. And there's a lot of passages that speak to this, especially when um, I don't have time to get into it now, but like there's a ton of passages that speak to uh, them ruling over the nation of Israel in their glorified forms. Especially when Christ was talking to his disciples, his Jewish disciples about this. Okay, I think that was the questions. Okay, I think I got it. Let's see. Yeah, salty decimator. I agree with JB Hickson. The Old Testament saints are not resurrected when we are the church age. The church is going to go first, and then at the end of the tribulation, prior to the kingdom, I believe the Old Testament saints are then given their glorified bodies. And again, we have 45 days at the end of the 70th week that things have to happen there. So I think the earth is being restored. I think the temple either rebuilt, destroyed, rebuilt, or purified, or whatever it's going to happen with the temple after the Antichrist has desecrated it. And then I believe the Old Testament saints are going to come back and they're going to be given bodies and they can rule and reign alongside the church, govern the world at that time. But I think they're specific to Israel. Okay, I think this was the last question. Richard Browder asked, do you think the US will institute the draft again? I am of the belief that they will. I am of the belief that they will. I think right now the US military can't meet its recruiting requirements. And even in some cities around the US, they're hiring illegal aliens to become police officers. As crazy as that is, right? So they're going to, I would imagine that they will institute some kind of draft. Now, here's where I think that this comes into play, though. We know that before the next election, there'll be some kind of crisis. We don't know what that crisis is going to be yet, but as far as the Democrats are concerned, they've played all their cards. They've showed their hand during the 2020 election, and everybody is wise to their games. I'm not saying that the Republicans are better because they seemingly haven't done a lot about it, but at least everybody knows, right? Everybody's wise to how they cheated in 2020, and they've played their hand. They've showed their hand. So I think there'll have to be some sort of crisis that takes place that kind of throws everything off the rails, just like it happened in 2008 with the mortgage crisis, and Obama got in, and then obviously with COVID and everything that happened with COVID in 2020. So what I foresee is that there's some kind of crisis. If that crisis becomes a conflict with, say, China, or some kind of Russia versus NATO, or worst case scenario, China and Russia against the US and NATO, um, I absolutely think they will institute a draft. And they're not going to care if you're overweight, if you smoked weed, or whatever you've done that would have normally disqualified you. They're going to throw a uniform on you and put a gun in your hand and say, "Here, go be a bullet stopper. You're on our front lines." So I think that that's going to happen, and I think women will be drafted too. So Hal Lindsey's still kicking. Yeah, I always thought that he would live to see the rapture. If anybody was deserving of it, it would be him. So, and let's see, question. I had one about Daniel 9:26. Does that apply to the end of times, Jerusalem being destroyed and build a new temple, a new third temple? Well, the power of the Daniel 9:26 says, and after the 62 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off. So we know that this happened in the first century, but not for himself. And the people of the prince who is to come, so this is speaking of the Antichrist, shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end of it shall be with a flood. Until the end of the war, desolations are determined. So we know the people of the prince who is to come were the Romans who destroyed Jerusalem and the temple in 70 AD. So that already happened. That was in the past. The only thing that's left to happen right now is going to be verse 27, which is that 70th week of sevens. So hopefully that answers that. Pete, your opinion on Planet X. Huh. Oh man, I don't know. I tend to think Lee Brainerd wrote a book called The Rogue, and talking about a rogue planet that it doesn't hit Earth, but it hits Mars. And when it hits Mars, it creates this huge field of asteroids and all kind of stuff that begins to shower the Earth as we're all going around the sun. And this planet hits Mars, and it kind of shatters Mars, and then it creates all this debris, and that's what we start seeing coming into play during the tribulation, like a giant mountain, like that's on fire, that's falling, and it lands in the sea, and then it turns the sea to blood. So I think that's I think that's where Planet X comes into play. Even though he wrote that as a fiction, that is a very plausible scenario. Did Hal Lindsey die? I don't think he died. Question, wait, Pete, did I hear you say frogs are now gay? No. I'm saying that Alex Jones was saying that a long time ago because of the water. There's something in the water that feminizes, creates it does something with the feminization of the DNA, and it changes male frogs into female frogs. Okay, so he's not dead. Good. Kate Young, opening a can of worms there, Pete. Planet X is a fascinating though. Hey, I think this is. I don't know if is that the planet that's supposed to hit in 20 or that's supposed to enter into our solar system in 2028. Ed Heinzen always said that it was clear that the wedding banquet will happen in heaven. I believe that it happens during the tribulation. While the world is going through the tribulation, will be in the wedding banquet. It also could possibly be at the end and at the beginning of the kingdom age. Pete, what do you think about Second Thessalonians 2:2? Okay. Second Thessalonians 2:2. Now, brethren, concerning the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our gathering together to him, we ask you not to be soon shaken in mind or troubled, either by spirit or by word or by letter, as if from us, as though the day of Christ had come. Is that the passage you were talking about? Paul's talking about he'd spent time in Thessalonica, and not much time. I think he was only there for like 3 weeks to maybe a month, and then he left, and he had during that time he taught them about the rapture and the that we're going to be delivered before the day of wrath. And key passages in First Thessalonians, or like First Thessalonians 1:10, obviously chapters 4:13 through 18, chapter 5 1 through 9, and then verse 9 5:9 itself is another passage reiterating that we will not go through wrath. But if she's still here, Mary, I'm not sure what you were asking about. Second Thessalonians 2:2. Jules, I am I don't want to trigger anybody here, and please just know that this is my opinion. So I don't want people to like sell their house, or move to the mountain and dress in white sheets and wait for the Lord to return. But I believe that I tend to believe that the rapture is sometime between now and 2026, but I kind of lean a little bit more towards 2024, the end of 2024. But here's what my thinking is on that. In Acts 17:26, it says that God establishes the boundaries and times of nations for his own purpose, right? God does that. So God has deemed the United States to be founded, initially in 1620 with the Pilgrims arriving, and then in 1776 to become a nation. And he's already predetermined the boundaries and lengths of our nation and the time in which we would live and exist as a nation. And since there's no mention of the United States or any country like the United States in any of the last days passages, theologians have wrestled with this idea. Well, what happens to the United States? We're not there. There's no nation resembling us anywhere in the prophecy. So I'm of the belief that the US has been allowed to expand into this massive empire. And I know we don't call ourselves an empire, but really our influence, whether it's political, cultural, um, militarily, um, economically, whatever you want to call it, all of those things we've got our fingers into every country in the world. I mean, we are the most we are everywhere. And I think that God allows us to collapse to create the vacuum that these 10 kings will eventually arise out of and create the beast kingdom. They'll create the 10 toes of the statue because we will have collapsed. And when we collapse, we're going to create this giant vacuum, this giant geopolitical vacuum that has to be filled. And so if if our end as a nation is to go down without a whimper, then I think the rapture happens prior to the 2024 elections. If God is going to allow the United States to go out this complete wild card and just, I mean, imagine if Trump gets elected. I mean, that is just going to throw the deep state and all these guys into a huge tailspin, and it could trigger a civil war. It could trigger the fracturing of our nation. I mean, there's a dozen different ways that could play out, but it could be so chaotic that in that when that happens, you have the rapture on top of that, and that just, really destabilizes everything. So I kind of think it's going to happen that way, um, only as maybe a form of judgment against our nation. So I tend to think that we may be here to see the election because I think of all the craziness that's going to stir up. But I hope I'm wrong. I hope we're out of here next month. I hope JD's right. I mean, there isn't any, like Andy Wood says, there isn't any problem that I have that the rapture couldn't solve. Annette asked, "Do you think the dollar will go bye-bye before or after the 24 election?" I think before. I think that may be I think that may be part of the crisis. It's either gonna be some kind of military crisis, some kind of pandemic crisis, or it'll be some kind of currency economic crisis. It's one of those 3. And you never know. I mean, we could all be wrong. It could be like Independence Day, aliens show up just out of the blue, but I don't think they're gonna show up until after the rapture. Laura B, thoughts on coming digital currency? Do we resist or go? Okay, Mary, I see your Second Thessalonians 2:3. Are you asking about the word apostasia? What do I think it is? Laura, I don't think we're gonna have much of a choice with digital currency. I think if you have the ability to if you have a network of people in your neighborhood or community or whatever where you guys can barter, somebody has chicken, somebody has eggs, or vegetables, milk, whatever, I think you're in a pretty good place where you can, as much as possible, not have to use it. But I think most people are not in that situation. I think most people are going to have to end up using it. It's kind of like when they started converting cassette tapes into CDs, and pretty soon you couldn't buy any tapes anywhere. Everything was CDs at a certain point. They're just going to phase out the tapes, or they did phase out the tapes. Everything became CDs, and so I think it's like that. I think it's gonna be where dollars more and more places are not gonna take dollars, and pretty soon you're gonna have to use, and the dollars are not gonna be worth anything. If you pay, think about, years ago, some places, if you paid with a credit card, you had to pay one price, but if you paid cash, you paid another price, like a cheaper price, and I think it's gonna be the reverse. If you pay cash, then they may charge you some kind of a surcharge for having to have to handle cash. And people pretty soon are not gonna pay extra just to pay cash. But as much as you can right now, use cash. Take money out of the bank, out of an ATM, and then pay wherever you go. Try to keep cash in circulation. That may help stave off, um, how fast this comes. There was a cash only Friday, every Friday, just plan on using cash everywhere. Um, but depending on how long the Lord tarries, I mean, we may see this happening, next year where, like, I get paid, like I don't get a check or anything. It just goes straight to it's like a direct deposit. So, I mean, it's all digits now. I mean, how hard would it be for them to change it to something else, and your card, uh, but this all goes into, um, if our US dollars are no longer legal tender. I mean, that's something that Biden couldn't just wave his wand and do that. I mean, that would, involve Congress, that would involve a complete restructuring of a lot of things, so it would take some kind of major crisis for that to really play out. And, speaking of persecution, I meant to mention this earlier, the Christian church, I can't speak for those in New Zealand or Canada or Australia, other places, because you don't have our constitution, but the way our structure of government is, it's checks and balances, right? In order for the government to persecute the church like some of the pastors are talking about, you would basically have to have the United States government, the Constitution completely be done away with, because right now, as it stands, there's still enough not salt, but there's still enough checks and balances within the system to prevent this from becoming, some kind of mainstream thing. Now, will it happen in particular places here and there? It has. It's happened you see, folks like I think somebody in Illinois, they got, booted for refusing to take the jab, and it was over religious reasons. Well, or they got kicked out of university or whatever it was, and they go back here like a year ago or 6 months ago, they took them to court, and now that these schools and these businesses have to pay millions of dollars to these people for doing that, for violating their First Amendment, or their constitutional rights. So, as it stands right now, there's still enough checks and balances in our country to prevent wholesale persecution against Christians. The whole system is gonna have to collapse in order for that to really, take place, and plus, you have more people with guns in our country than any place in the world, and so I think what the Biden administration has been doing right now has really been, um, maybe trying to provoke the American public to rise up in some type of conflict so they could declare martial law. And it seems like they're they're poking the bear right now. And if you remember back in World War II, the Japanese, I think it was a general or an admiral, and I think it was right after they attacked Pearl Harbor, and he was famously said, like, "I think all we've done is awakened a sleeping giant," or something to that effect. And I think that our government's trying to do that right now. So, um, Oh man, I have been on a long time tonight. 2 hours, 20 minutes. All right, guys. Let's see. Okay, Annette, question: if Biden, um, yeah, anything that any climate emergency, any type of new pandemic. I mean, Americans went along with it back in 2020 because it was really the first time we've had anything like that. I don't think people are going to go along with it like they did before. Not even people in blue states. I don't think it's going to happen. They may try and do it, but I think what they were doing with like the mask and the lockdowns and some of that stuff we've heard is that if you work for the government can maybe mandate if you work for like the TSA, for instance, the government can say, okay, everybody that works for the TSA has to wear a mask again. And they can do that because that's their employer. But the minute they try and apply that to everybody, I mean, it's gonna get bogged down in court like crazy. Carrie H asked a great question. Do you think women will have unique roles in a millennium that differ from men? I could say something really funny right now, but I don't want to have half the audience up in arms with me. Um, I don't know. That's a good question. Um, honestly, I don't know. I never really thought about it. I imagine that whatever roles you guys have, you guys will be completely jazzed about it. You'll be like, "Yeah, this is awesome." You'll be in your glorified bodies, so you'll also be able to travel at the speed of thought. You know, you think about you could go anywhere in the universe and you won't be affected because you're in these basically Superman bodies, right? Or Superwoman, Supergirl, whatever. No, I can't say it. I don't wanna say it. Kevin Douglas said it, "Doing dishes." No, 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 no. Somebody somewhere will hear this and say that I'm a misogynist and blah, 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 blah. They'll take it out of context and I'll get you know how it is these days. Nobody has a sense of humor. In the kitchen, barefoot. No, just kidding. Just kidding. Question, Pete. I don't know your testimony. Can you give a quick version? Oh man, I don't know if there is a quick version. I was raised in church. I grew up in the church. When I graduated high school in '92, I basically fell away. You know, started the process of not falling away, but being a prodigal. And I was 18 and I didn't really care about this stuff. I cared about chicks and fast cars and all that. And that kind of just lasted a lot longer than I maybe originally had intended. But it wasn't until 2007 that, um, the fall of 2007, I was sitting in a church in Fort Campbell, or right outside of Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and was sitting in the back of the church. There wasn't anybody around me. It was like the third service. People were on stage. They were trying to raise money to build a new church because they um, had outgrown that church, and so people were on stage giving a testimony that you have to forgive the train. Um, they had given beyond their tithe, and so God was blessing them, and I was just like, "Oh, brother, like this is just a pitch to." Every time I go to, I was randomly going to church at this time. I wasn't going all the time, but the one time I decided to go, they're talking about money, which is like, oh, and I was sitting there, and I just remember I heard 3 words, and it sounded like somebody came up to me and said it, or said it right next to my ear because I was immediately like looking around, trying to figure out what happened. And I heard those 3 words, and then I didn't know hardly anything about the Bible at this time. I basically was biblically illiterate. I knew, like, the basic stories like Noah and Daniel and the lion's den, that kinda stuff, but, um, I, I remember thinking immediately, like, I need to validate this to know if this is from God or if this is from the devil, because I know there's good and, bad forces out there. And, I said, "All right, God, if this is," and I'm praying this in my head. I'm like, "All right, God, if this is from you, have the pastor call me this week." And I was so I went so irregularly that he didn't know me. I could have walked past him in Walmart and he wouldn't recognize me. And, sure enough, man, that week, it was Wednesday at noon, I got a phone call. I was out on the flight line and I was coming back in off the flight line, and my phone rings and I pull it out, and I didn't recognize the number. I'm like, "Hello?" And he's like, "Hey, this is Pastor," whatever his name was, from the church. And he's like, "We got a card from you, a membership card, not a membership card, but a something said I'd been there, guest visitor, or whatever. And we heard you're in the military. Want to invite you to some men's Bible study or something, military Bible study." And I'm just, my jaw's on the floor. I'm like, "Oh my goodness, like, I can't believe this just happened." And I begin to tell him what happened in the church, and at that point, he probably thought he probably thought I was a nut. He's probably regretting calling me. So, so anyways, from that moment on, that next month, I was going to a school in San Antonio, Texas, and I was a captain, and I had a team leader who was a lieutenant below me, and he and I were real tight. This guy worked out all the time. He was really ripped, and he and I would go party all the time and chase girls and all that. And we so I'm in San Antonio, and I get a call. It was a Saturday night. I got a call from my friend, and it was like 3 in the morning, and I was like, he must have forgot that I'm down here, and he's probably drunk and whatever. And I was like, I'll just call him tomorrow. And so that next day, I went to an old church that I used to go to a long time ago, and after the church, is a little country church, and after that, I went and had lunch with some people that I grew up with, and he was a retired Navy Master Chief, and him and his family, I'd known them since I was like in 5th grade, so longtime friends. And I'm sitting there eating lunch with them, and then I get a phone call. I'm looking at my phone, and it's my boss. It was my commander, and I was like, "Hey guys, apologize. I have to take this to my boss." I was like, "Hey, what's going on, sir?" He's like, "Where are you?" And I was like, "Well, I'm eating lunch with some friends." He's like, "I need you to go outside." And I was like, "Okay." And so immediately my first thought was like, I'm in trouble, like I did something wrong. And then I began to think like, well, maybe one of my soldiers got in trouble. And now I'm, having to answer for something they did over there. And so I go outside, and he said, "Well, we had a death in the unit." And I said, and my first thought was that it was, Private so and so, like a soldier that was killed in a car accident. And he said, it was Greg. He said, "And Greg's dead." And at this point, I'm in shock. I'm like, "What?" And I'm thinking car accident. He's like, "No, I was like, "What happened?" And he's like, "Greg shot himself." And then it felt like all the air got sucked out of me, and I kind of slumped against the car. I've never been hit like this before. I've seen it in movies and, things, but I had never personally felt like this before. It destroyed me, like, in a second, like, and I don't know how to describe it, but you get hit with that kinda news. And he had just called me that night, and I didn't answer the phone. He called me at, like, 3, and according to I guess, the police report, this happened about 3:30 or 4. So, you know, that destroyed me. I mean, I was a mess for the next couple months. And and I had never witnessed to the guy. I wasn't even confident enough, and I didn't even know enough to share the gospel with him, but I knew I was a Christian, and I knew he wasn't, or I didn't think he was because he never talked about it. It was never anything we ever discussed. So anyways, I, down from Kentucky, I stopped in our town that we live in now, and we really hit it off, and so during this time, I'm really, like, leaning on her for emotional support and, this was October, and I think we got married in December, so we'd only known each other for a few months. You think about everything you can do wrong in a relationship. You meet online, you barely know each other, and then you get married, and I deploy right after that to Afghanistan. I mean, we had the recipe for disaster all over the place there for us, but, um but we've been married, this is our 17th year, we've been together, and I love her more now than I did. I mean, always loved her, but, like, I appreciate her more now than I did then because she's, stuck with me all these years, crazy stuff I've gotten into. But during this time period, I, uh, I remember praying one thing. I said, "God, uh, give me a hunger for your word because I don't wanna read the Bible." I hated reading the Bible, it was boring, I didn't get anything out of it. I could read a verse and my eyes start growing heavy, and I just didn't find it interesting at all. And I said, "God, if you want me to be this guy that you've called me to be, you gotta make me wanna read the Bible. You gotta give me a hunger for it." And then the second thing I prayed for was wisdom. I said, "God, if I get the hunger for reading this, help me to understand what I'm reading because it doesn't make any sense to me right now." And that was in December, 2007, January 2008, somewhere in there. And from then on, man, it just like I became obsessed with the Bible. I got to reading it, hours and hours and hours upon end. I didn't know what I believed necessarily. I wasn't fixed in any particular position. I knew like the basics, right? I knew Jesus was Christ, he was God. I knew the Trinity and things like that. But in terms of like eschatology, Bible prophecy, I didn't know where I stood yet on anything. And I think after a year or two, somewhere in the process, and I had looked at everything. I had looked at pre-wrath, I looked at post-trib, and a lot of these things made sense in some degrees, and then other things that didn't make sense to me. And I had a lot of questions. And I remember somewhere in this process, I came across the Omega letter, and just the way Jack Kinsella was able to take really complex topics and just dumb it down for a guy like me, I just resonated with me. And I just, man, I just became, if I can put it in this terms, I was like a disciple of his. He was like a mentor or disciple, I don't know, modern day version of it, and I learned from Jack. And eventually they invited me to write for the Omega letter off of a comment that I had made in the forums. I noticed something, and the thing I think I pulled out was that I or noticed was that the synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, all have a Olivet discourse, and that John didn't because it's to the church. And there was something in relation to that that I had brought out, and his daughter Carrie invited me to write on Jack's request to write for the Omega letter. And they knew I was in the military, and I think they wanted me to kind of focus on military stuff. But I've had a top secret clearance for, I don't know, 15 years. It just expired this year, but I was telling him, I was like, "Dude, I can't write military stuff." I said, "I have a top secret clearance, and I don't wanna violate that, and I don't even wanna get anywhere in the neighborhood of anything military." So they let me write about, basically whatever I want to write about, and that's how I kinda got going to doing what I'm doing now. And, I got to about my 70th article, and, I had really bad writer's block for a couple weeks. And I remember telling Jack once, I was like, "Dude, I don't even know what to write anymore. Everything I wanna write about has already been written about." And then he said, "But it's never been written by you." And once he told me that, it kinda opened everything back up, and now I've written, I don't know, 700 articles or so. Um, but somebody had asked earlier what those words were, and, the words I heard, and I'm not kidding, I am not kidding, was "prepare the underground." And I remember when I heard this, I dude, I didn't know anything about prophecy. I I was a prophecy dummy. I was like, "Well, what does that mean?" You know? And I asked that question for a lot of years, like, "What does that mean? Do I need to, like, stock up water in my house or something?" You know? I I don't know. I think what we're doing now in writing and in leaving left behind material and leaving video evidence and all of this that we're doing, I think is part of that. And I can't explain how that will help the tribulation saints, but in some way it will. And God will keep using me, and if it becomes something else, and he'll reveal that at that time. Um, Joe Mama, did he say prepare the underground? Yes, that's what I said. Um, again, I don't I don't know what that fully means yet. I think it is preparing the underground church that comes in the tribulation, but that's just kind of where my mind has been the last few years. And if you go back to some of my older writings, I never told anybody for years. I think the first time I really talked about this out loud was in 2015. I I wrote about it in an article that I wrote with the Omega Letter, um, and then I've talked about it a few times since then. But yeah, that's exactly what I heard. And I'm not the kind of guy that has dreams. My dreams are really just weird. They don't make any sense. I dreamt the other night that my wife had we have a tin roof on our house. I dreamt that she put dirt all over the roof and then put these large, like, placer stones that you'd have in a garden, like a path or something. She covered the roof with these placer stones, and it kinda looked like a hobbit house or something, you know? I don't know. That doesn't make any sense, but I don't trust my dreams. I don't do any of that stuff. But this happened to me, hand on the Bible right now, all things holy, that this happened to me, and I can't explain it. I think an angel just God said, "Hey, go tell him this. This is what the motivation that he needs to change course or whatever." I don't know, but that's why I'm here now. The Shire Pete. Carly, I bet your house has looks exactly like that. It's like a dirt hut with a big round door. Uh, maybe Lynette, it means that she knows I'm going to New Zealand for a conference. So yeah, that's my testimony. Um, I used to be a hammer. Once I got all this wisdom, or not wisdom, but once I got all the Bible smarts, I was just beating everybody with it. And for years, you would not like me. I was a very arrogant guy. And it would take my wife and softening the rough edges on me to get to where I am today. So um, my poor wife, she grew up in Church of Christ. They didn't know anything about prophecy. They never studied prophecy. So here, her new husband that's coming back from Afghanistan with PTSD and 1,000-yard stare, and now he's all into Bible prophecy, and the world's going to end. And she's probably thought I lost my mind. But over time, I think as the world keeps getting weirder and weirder, my position doesn't seem so weird anymore. Thank you, Kate. Uh, all right, guys. Well, I spilled my guts. You guys know my secret. Yeah, me too, Nina. Katie, that's one of those things I never claimed on the military. When you retire, you have to do your medical stuff. I never claimed it because I never really thought I had it, but I do. I mean, like, I remember coming back, I was just I was working 12 hours a day for 8 months, 9 months straight. I didn't have any breaks, and all we saw was, like, convoys getting blown up, and it was a lot, you know? I've seen a lot of death. I think in a way that's desensitized me because I was a medevac guy for, when I was in Iraq. Um, we were there during the some of the worst parts of it, and I remember we had what they call a MASCAL, which is a mass casualty event, and we landed in this soccer stadium in, Kissick, Iraq, which is I was stationed in Tal Afar, and Kissick was here, and then Mosul is over here, so they were doing some kind of military recruitment or something, and some guys went in there, and there was, hundreds of people in there. And they went in there with suicide vest and blew themselves up, and so you had just bodies everywhere. We had to land our helicopters in there, and just looking at looking at it, it was surreal. It looked like something out of a movie. It was hard to process it, and the smell of, burnt bodies and stuff is just anyways, I'm getting way too metaphysical or whatever. And that no, I used to. I haven't in recent years since I retired. I do talk to a couple of them, but I've pulled off of Facebook, so that's how I was talking to some of them, but I generally don't. There's 1 or 2 guys there left that I still talk to a little bit. It's funny, Sue, so I've been to Australia twice, and, um, honestly, why I'm really stoked about going, I mean, I got asked to come on to be a part of this conference thing in February with Tom and the other guys, and I guess I was requested. I don't know, um, but the first time I went to Australia, I met a girl there, and, I'm only there for, like, a couple weeks, but we hit it off or whatever, and she had some kind of, family thing, and so she was bringing me over there to meet her family, while they're doing this little family get together thing, and they had an uncle there that he was a, Australian guy that had served in Vietnam, and he never talked about Vietnam, like, to anybody ever. I mean, I guess he had had a real traumatic time over there, and, I had a video. One of our warrant officers had made this video of kind of like our all of our missions, flying and taking off and doing all this stuff, um, put it to music and everything. It was pretty cool at the time, looking at it. And I played it for them because I had just come from Iraq. So I'd only been back, I was back in the States for just a week or two, and then I had already bought tickets to go to Australia. So I'm there, I meet her, and so I had to still have this DVD with me. And so I played it for them to show them what they were asking me what it was like, because this is right in the height of the Iraq War. And I think a lot of people wanted, curious about what it was like over there. So I played this video for them, and then the uncle starts talking about Vietnam, and I didn't know this, right? I didn't know this guy. I never met any of these people before, and he was telling the stories about Vietnam. So he and I are talking back and forth, and after we left, the girl, she goes, "Do you know that he has never in all my life ever talked to anybody about Vietnam, his experiences. You're the first guy." And I was like, "Wow, I didn't know that." I think, mutual soldiers, we kind of connect on a different level, we just can, um, share that burden of what it's like over there. So that was pretty cool experience. But I have to go back. So the reason I'm going to Australia and New Zealand is 'cause when I went there, I was still in my prodigal phase. This is right before the experience in the church, and all I did over there was party. So I have to go back and redeem myself, redeem my time in Australia, and share the gospel there because the last time I was there, I was absolutely no good to anybody. So now, um, now I feel very compelled to share the gospel there. Good night, Misha, or whoever's going to sleep. Carly. Good night, Carly. Well, guys, it's late. It is really late. Pete, if you could go back in time, would you have still joined the military? Honestly, I think I wish I had been a better Christian back when I was younger and had gone into a mission field. If I could do it over again and kind of knowing everything in hindsight, I would have done that. But who knows what that would mean? I mean, it would mean I probably wouldn't have my kids today. Like there's so many repercussions because of those decisions. So I don't know. I mean, it's to theorize because we can never do it, but I would have liked to have been a better Christian earlier and not have waited so long to, get my spiritual act together. Yeah, Katie, it is. It's tough. And I tell you, um, in a way, being a believer, especially in these days that we live in, um, for a lot of years, I thought I was pretty much alone because I just wrote articles, I submitted them to a website. I wasn't plugged in with any online groups or anything like that. And at the time, the only people that I knew that taught about this stuff was like Jan Markell and JD Farag. That was really the two sources that I listened to kind of on a weekly basis. And then I think later I got introduced to like Andy Woods but I was reading like the old books. I was reading like Clarence Larkin, um, gosh, who's a guy through the Bible, J. Vernon McGee, and guys like that, guys that already passed on, Harry Ironside, a lot of the guys that had long since gone because I thought, well, these guys had already lived their lives. They're not going to they've been proven true through their whole life. That's the guys I want to read because you can't always trust modern day preachers and teachers. I mean, look at a guy like Ravi Zacharias. I mean, I loved Ravi Zacharias, but then after he dies, you find out about all this stuff on the back, the backside. But the guys that had long since dead and had these amazing testimonies their entire life, faithful to their wives, led churches for 30, 40 years, went on to keep teaching and so on, and they'd run their race and I really respected that, and I thought that's who I want to learn from. So most of the people that I ever read early on were guys that had already passed on. There are a few exceptions. I had, J.R. Church, Dave Hunt, Jack Kinsella, obviously Jack Kelly, or a couple of the newer guys. But you guys didn't know that Jessica was Storming Norman's daughter. I thought everybody knew that already. Sorry. Yeah, I did an interview with Jessica. If you go on my website, it's on there somewhere. It's probably like feels like years ago, but it wasn't that long ago, I don't think. Maybe just a year, maybe? Um, Kate Young, how did I miss that? You're coming to Australia? I'll be there. It's in the first week of February 2024, and I think it is in Melbourne, if I'm not mistaken. Brisbane or Melbourne, one of the two. The only way that we probably won't go is if they do some kind of like vaccine mandate or something, if they make some kind of medical mandate for anybody traveling into the country. But if that's not the case and we're not like in World War III or something, we'll be there. Oh, hold on. As soon as I click on this, it jumps on me, and I gotta go back to where I was. Somebody wanted me to pray for their 14-year-old daughter. I'm trying to find it. Okay. Jay Wojo, pray for my 14 oh sister, 14-year-old dear sister. Will do. You have the same draw that Paul had in wanting to go to Rome. Thank you, Sue. It's an utter shock going from the Air Force to the Coast Guard. uh, Hepatic addict. Hey, hey. Hepatic addict. Is that 7? Heptad? Heptad is 7. A.W. Tozer, yeah. I started on the Rapture Ready forum. Yep. Um, Les Feldick. I like Les Feldick. There's another guy too that I really like. Lambert Dolphin is another guy that he's really not out there. He doesn't get out there much. I don't even know if he's teaching still. David Hawking. Yeah. Jay Vernon. What enemy meant for turns around for good. What are the ages of your kids? My kids are ages 7, 9, 10, 11, and 17. Do you know if Barry Scarborough is okay? Last I heard, he's having some health issues and some stuff. But as far as I know, Tyler talked to him not too long ago. Um, just like so many of us, just trying to plug along and limping, we're limping toward the finish line. BPNE. Les Feldick was a hyper dispensationalist. I didn't know that. I don't know enough about Les Feldick to know what he believes about everything. Sorry I wasted so much time. Yeah, me too. I was 33 before I got my life turned around. I have done interviews with Terry James. In fact, he and I wrote 2 books together. I'm sure you knew that already. Um, in fact, well, also in Oklahoma, he and I will probably do some interviews together. It is my plan, or I'm sure that our plan together. Um, See, I don't feel like ready now. I don't that's what I don't understand. Like I don't understand why I understand scripture the way I do. Like for instance, Andy Woods teaches a position on apostasia that it's a physical departure. Lee Brainerd comes out on the other side and says, no, it's a spiritual departure. And both sides have really good arguments for it. The position I've always had was, why can't it mean both? Because at the minute of the rapture, all that's going to be left is the apostate church. I think Andy Woods makes a great point that you can't, I mean, which apostasy? I mean, like, there's been so many movements that have fallen away, whether you're talking about the Mormons or the Jehovah Witnesses or Christian Science or the prosperity gospel, or, I mean, there's more false heretical movements than you could shake a stick at. So, which one? I think that we're in the age of Laodicea right now, which is the growing position within Christendom that is caving to a culture that is, you know, becoming increasingly corrupted. But there are remnants of these other groups in there: Thyatira believers, Sardis believers, Philadelphian believers. So I think we're all still in it, but the overarching period of time is going to be Laodicea, waiting the blessed hope. Pete, and I'll appreciate any advice on how to better share Jesus with family with closed eyes and ears. I don't know about family, but most of my immediate family they're all Christians. So, and I have been removed from other family for a very long time, but um, I think I had a coworker tonight. He wanted to go out to eat because it's my last couple days here, and he believes um, that when you die, you just get absorbed back into God, like like God is the force, and all the religions basically we call God different names, but it's all the same God. And when you die, I was like, well, how can they be all the same God when they're all so different? I mean, they all, in Hinduism, you have millions of gods. In Islam, you have one God. In Christianity, you have got one God and three persons. Judaism, you have one God. In pantheism, everything is God. I mean, so they can all be wrong, but they can't all be right, right? So I was like, how is that? He's like, I don't know. I just feel like I was like, well, and he and I have had this conversation before, so I wasn't gonna beat this dead horse, but I was like, well, eternity is a long time to figure out if you're right or wrong. I said, but the Bible says Jesus is the only way to salvation. And I said, and I had already gone through a lot of the arguments with him on other walks and stuff we'd done, talks about things, and so he knows my position on this, but I think he likes to keep trying to figure stuff out or something. I don't know, but uh, I don't know. You just share the truth with them, and you share the scripture with them. Tell them what Christ did in your life, and obviously, I mean, if they're family, they probably seen the change in your life. They know that. Pray. Well, I say first of all, pray for the opportunity. Pray that God, that the Holy Spirit, makes that moment happen, that door to open for that conversation to happen. And when you plant seeds, whether you're sharing the gospel or if they're talking about the craziness in the world, maybe you can put in there, well, this is the way the Bible said it's going to happen. Whatever the angle is that you can get in, I think you're planting seeds, and at that point, if they're receptive to it, then they're going to keep probing and asking the questions. If they seem closed off to it, then I think you are at the very minimum, you're planting the seed that may be watered down the road. It may be right after the rapture, like right after it happens, that they realize, oh man, cousin so and so or whoever, I think this is what they were talking about. And then at that point, it sucks for them because now they're going to have to scramble inside of the tribulation to survive and come to Jesus in their faith and everything. But at the very least, they could be saved still. Good night, Viking. Yeah, Jessica. I think honestly that's the one prayer. If you pray to God and ask Him for opportunities to share the gospel, that is the one prayer I guarantee will get answered. Carol asks or says, with the apostasia, could it be that the is a definite article in this verse, meaning the physical departure, where a spiritual departure is not one event, it happens gradually? I agree with that. But here I'm thinking like, well, what if God had Paul, the Holy Spirit had Paul use that word because it can be used both ways. And so it is both it'll both be a physical departure, and what remains is going to be the apostate church. And to me, that always made sense. I never really struggled with that. It's kinda like Calvin it's kinda like, predestination versus free will. I mean, the church has been arguing about that for 400 years, when in reality, it's both, you know? Yeah, God knows how who's gonna believe, and he has that omniscience to know who's gonna get saved and who's not gonna get saved, and he may, in fact, be drawing particular people to do certain things, but we still have free will. It's not 100% one way or the other, it's both ways. As far as sharing the gospel goes, the one thing I know that we are not responsible for the results. We just need to be obedient in the telling and the doing. Um, the results are God's business. So we be faith if we are faithful in sharing the gospel, living the gospel, um, being the gospel to people that may never open a Bible or go into a church, um, then God is responsible for the results. Thank you, Mary. One of the things that happened with this whole kind of rift we had a few weeks ago, I keep coming back to this passage in um, the upper room discourse where Jesus says that people are going to know you're my disciples by how much you love each other. And I used to read that and thinking, oh, that's all like wishy washy kind of, whatever. Love is easy. Man, it's the hardest thing in the world to love people, especially people that are unlovable. But if we can do that, we can move mountains. Well, all right, guys. I don't know if anybody else is on tonight. It's pretty late, but unless there's any other questions, I think I want to call it a night. Yeah, I would say in marriage, in Ephesians it says, women, wives honor your husband, and men love your wives like Christ loved the church. And I noticed it doesn't say that women, it doesn't instruct women to love their husbands. It says like honor your husband. Um, but men love your wives like Christ loved the church. Yeah, most of us guys are pretty unlovable. So, Jane asks about the Seven Thunders. I have wondered about the Seven Thunders for a long time. I kind of think the Seven Thunders are judgments. I think the Seven Thunders will be, uh, it's like a master general is not going to reveal all of his plans, right? So, yeah, he has the 21 judgments listed out there that are in scripture. But these Seven Thunders are like wild cards. We don't know what they're going to be or what they are. They may be something that really shakes up the world in a way that even Satan wasn't anticipating. So, yeah, good night, Carly. No, Jessica, yeah, so again, Thursday night, I won't be on, Discord because I'm gonna be traveling that day. Um, I have some friends here in Kentucky that I'm gonna eat dinner with on Wednesday night. Thursday night, I'm gonna hang out with my boss, my old boss before I leave, and then I have to be at the airport at, like, 4 in the morning on Friday, so I'll be to bed, like, super early on Thursday. But, yeah, so I won't have Discord on Thursday. I don't know if I'll be on next Monday night or not. Depends on, getting back home, getting back in the rhythm with the kids and the school and everything like that. So, I'm not gonna commit to it just yet, but as of right now, I don't think I am, but I am gonna have those videos uploaded to my website. I'll have a tab on the top. You may not see it on your phone, but on the website itself, there's tabs at the top. And I'll have a tab for Bible studies, and that'll go through Revelation. And I tried to break them up into real short sections, like they're not very long each section, but I'm basically just going through Revelation. So I think there's like 11 videos right now, and that get me from chapter one all the way to chapter three. So yeah, Brandy, I am not a King James only guy. I don't have any issue with King James. I like it as a translation. I think I take issue when people say that that is the only legitimate Bible. That really irks me. Um, not my home. Pete, do you think it's possible that the three horns that the Antichrist destroys could be Black Rock, State Street, and Vanguard? That would be awesome if it is true. Yeah. Hey, Jessica, you could text me the questions tomorrow, when I'm awake or whatever. Um, all right, I know we'll lift you up in prayer in that. Um, But yeah, thank you, mods. Thank you, Sir Pierce Seville, Carly, and I don't know if anybody else was on modding tonight. And if I remember, I don't remember, but if I saw correctly, Carly, congratulations is in order, maybe. Um, Cam, I don't think that'll be an issue over there. They're pretty liberal in Israel, especially Tel Aviv. Oh, right on. I'll definitely send him my congratulations as well. But yeah, thank you guys. If I don't see it, I won't see you Thursday, but if I don't see you next Monday, again, I'll have my videos posted on the website. Go there. Once I get them loaded on the website, I'll also make a playlist on YouTube and you should be able to pull them up that way. But let me know what you think in those. They're not meant to be like super deep dives. They're just meant to really for younger people to, yeah, that's why I made them into really short sections for younger folks to read and if or to sit there and listen to just kind of going through the book of Revelation. So thank you guys. I'll post this video to the website tomorrow, so it'll be on there. And then yep, you guys have been a blessing tonight. It's been really awesome hanging with you. I love the Monday nights. I'm glad it's worked out to be a pretty good night to do it on. And you guys are an amazing audience. Always love the interaction on the chat. You guys are always thinking of questions that I ain't even thought of in my 15 years. Thanks, Tim. But yeah, I'm gonna pray us out. And for those that had prayer requests, I'm gonna just kind of mention it in a general sense because I'm sure there was more than just the one. But dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we just thank you for today. We thank you for the opportunity to gather as a body of believers, like minded believers who are very excited about your coming. Lord, we don't know when that's gonna be, but we know it's soon. Just as you promised in your word, we'd see the day approaching, and we know the season. And Lord, we can see the day approaching, and we definitely know we're in the season. So I think our excitement level is pretty high. Lord, we just thank you for all your blessings. Thank you for sending your son to die on the cross for our sins, Lord. We if we weren't for that, we'd be doomed. We'd be no hope. And we'll never have enough time in eternity to thank you for that. Um, we just we lift up all the prayer requests to you here tonight, all the unspokens, all the ones that I've missed through the chat, and there's so many different issues going on, Lord. But you know what's going on, Lord. And just like in the seven letters, Lord, you said, "I know your struggles, I know your tribulations, I know your works." Lord, you know these things, you know all of them. You were there with us through all of these things, Lord, and we are just so grateful to have such a loving Savior that cares about us as much as you do. Lord, we thank you for the plan of redemption you have for us. That not just that you saved us, saved our souls, and saved us for eternity, but Lord, you're also going to remove us from the earth before the time of testing comes upon the whole earth. Lord, we just thank you for the blessed hope. We thank you for the promise you gave in John 14, 1 through 3, that if you go away, that you'd come back to receive us to yourself, so that where you are, we might be there also. We just thank you for thinking about us in this. You said that 2,000 years ago, but you were looking down the portal of time and looking at us here in these last days. And Lord, we just thank you for that. We thank you for being an awesome and amazing God. And just pray for everybody here tonight. Pray you keep everybody safe, and Lord, open the doors of opportunities for everybody here to share the gospel, so that whether we plant or water or harvest, Lord, we pray that you would be glorified in that. But help us to be faithful in the calling, Lord. Just pray that you would guide our steps and guide our words, guide our conversations and our actions, so that we always bring glory to you. And we just thank you for all this in the name above all names, Jesus Christ. Lord, we just thank you, and amen. So amen, guys. And Maranatha, love you guys. Please have a good week. Be loving to each other. Be kind. Show the love of Christ to everybody. And as Chooch would say, here, there, or especially in the air. I can't steal his. His punchline. Not a punchline, but his outro. So thank you guys, and see you next time. Lord bless.